Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Lori. So welcome, everybody, to the June 15th, 2023 NEWAC meeting today. This is the Interested Parties meeting, and I'm really excited to have this meeting today. So in order for us to start, we need to call the meeting to order, in which we've done, and we need to do a roll call to establish a quorum. So I'm just going to, I think there's another slide after this slide with names, or maybe it's the previous slide. Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to read out the names and see if you're here. If you are, please indicate so. So Garrett Chan is here. Janine Graves. Janine Graves is not here yet. Barbara Barney Knox.
I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, great. Good morning, BBK. Thank you. Hey. Carmen Consti. That's actually spelled wrong, I think.
It's spelled wrong, but that's okay. I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning, Carmen. Karen Rizal.
Good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you. Hazel Torres.
Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning, Hazel. Jacqueline Bowman.
Good morning. I'm here.
Great. Thank you. Joanne Spetz is going to be late. We've heard from her. Kathy Hughes. Kathy, are you here? No, not yet. Kim Doe.
Here. Good morning.
Good morning, Kim. Linda Fan. No Linda yet. Saji de Guzman. Not here yet. Sandra Miller has sent me a message, and so she's not going to be able to make it today. So Tammy Ventel.
I'm here.
Good morning, Tammy. Tanya Altman.
Good morning. I'm here.
Great, thanks, Tanya. And Wendy Hansborough.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, thank you. And we have our illustrious leader, Lori Melby. Thank you very much for being here, Lori. And I also want to just publicly thank all the BRN staff who make this all happen. There's a lot of behind the scenes, so thank you to the BRN staff. Excellent. So
Reza's on our legal counsel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Reza, sorry.
Good morning. This is Reza, BRN Legal Counsel.
Thank you, Reza. Good morning. So I just like to open the this Interested Parties meeting. It's an exciting time, I think. NEWAC had been started in previous years, and then we were a bit on hiatus. And then last year with the BRN Sunrise legislation, Assembly Bill 2684, the legislature decided that they wanted to codify the Nursing Education and Workforce Advisory Committee into statute. And so the committee was reconstituted, and the BRN staff did some great work in getting the appropriate people onto the NEWAC committee. And now we started in late last year just to kind of get settled and try to figure out what was happening after the legislation was passed. And in some of the conversations that we've been having in NEWAC so far is that we want to be very open and responsive to the public, and we want to encourage dialogue. And because of the Bagley-Keene Act, which is the act that governs meetings, sometimes it can be hard to engage and so with the public because of the rules, and we want to follow the rules and we want to follow the law. And so we want to thank you for joining the NEWAC Interested Parties meeting today. By way of background, NEWAC has identified a total of 8 subcommittees to date to work with the public to address confronting nursing. The 8 subcommittees are in general, these are general topics. They're not the specific titles of the subcommittees, are looking at first, or one of them is simulation standards. Another one is annual BRN survey. 3 is pathways into nursing. 4 is looking at the academic practice gap and new grad orientation. Another one is workforce retention and resilience. Another one was cultural competency and humility. Another one is faculty workforce. And then the 8th is clinical placements and the impaction of clinical placements. So the purpose of this interested parties meeting is to allow NEWAC members to be able to hear from the public and discuss the topics in this meeting's agenda, again, pursuant to the Bagley-Keene Act. And we look to Reza to help us make sure we're following the law. And because that's a very important role for him to play among many other roles as our legal counsel. And so in essence, the Bagley-Keene Act, I'm going to just say in essence because I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to say in essence, the Bagley-Keene Act restricts members of the BRN and its committees from having group conversations without a properly noticed meeting. And so hearing from the public today will help inform the subcommittee co-chairs' thinking as they plan for future work of their subcommittees. This meeting also allows other NEWAC members who are not on the subcommittees to provide information to the co-chairs pursuant to the Bagley-Keene Act. And today, what we were going to have is we're going to talk about, we're going to engage, or we're going to highlight, if you will, 3 of the subcommittees today. In NEWAC, as I mentioned earlier, is a subcommittee of, or is a advisory committee to the BRN. And the BRN is a state governmental agency that was established by law to protect the public by regulating the practice of registered nurses and advanced practice nurses. The BRN is responsible for implementation and enforcement of the Nursing Practice Act, the laws related to nursing education, licensure, practice, and discipline. And so today we welcome all comments to help educate and inform the members of NEWAC. Some suggestions may be outside the scope of the BRN's purview to act, but the information will always be helpful nonetheless. I also want to just say that we welcome all perspectives, even if there's disagreement. And the BRN is very dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. And, you know, with that comes difference of opinion. And we welcome that because through that perhaps disagreement or differing of perspectives, it will help us understand the issues more fully. It will ensure that we elevate all voices, even when there is dissent. And so we want to open up this space for everybody today to ensure that we have all voices heard, which is really important when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. One other thing that I just want to say is that NEWAC has an email address. And so if we don't talk, or if we're not able to cover everything that we want to cover today, or if you have additional thoughts, we welcome anybody to send an email to the NEWAC email address at the BRN, and that will be shared. The staff will evaluate, you know, what has been sent in, and then make sure that it's sent on to the appropriate person. And this is another way for the public to continue to engage with NEWAC to make sure that we are responsive to everybody's needs. I think the last thing I'd like to say, and this is, I would say, a point of personal privilege, is, and I hope I'm not going to out you, Karen, but if I understand correctly, Karen Rizal will be retiring, if I heard correctly, and she's been a very important member of NEWAC. She serves as a representative from the healthcare Access and Information Workforce Development Division, and has been the Deputy Director for HCI. I hope that is correct information. Karen, I didn't reach out to you because I didn't want to violate any Bagley team, but is that correct information? Oh, I'm sorry. For some reason, I can't hear you. Let me just double check.
Karen's
There we
muted.
go. I think I unmuted myself there. I'm unmuted. Yes, it is correct. I am retiring at the end of June and really appreciate having been participating in this committee.
Thank you, Karen. And I want to thank you on behalf of NEWAC, but also me personally. You have been a stalwart leader for us in workforce, changing from OSHPD into HCI. It's been, all changes can be challenging, but you have led us through that. And we really appreciate all of your hard work and your dedication to the state of California in your many years of service. So thank you so much. It's been really a pleasure. And I wish you, on behalf of the NEWAC committee, all the best in your next adventures.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. So sorry, Reza, Lori, there is no open comments for my opening remarks, is there? I want to make sure I follow the right rules.
Just real quick, I'm going to go ahead and just set some ground rules from the agenda item summary that is in the packet. Starting on page 4, there gives just kind of a background of what NEWAC is, and Garrett covered that wonderfully. So ground rules. The NEWAC chair, which is Garrett, with the assistance of myself and moderators, will guide the discussion. When you speak, although it's not required, it is helpful if you state your name and the organization and or community that you represent so that the committee and the public may know who is speaking as well as who they represent within the community. You are still permitted to comment if you choose not to identify yourself. Everyone is encouraged to participate and no person should dominate a discussion. Listen to and respect other points of views. Do your best to understand the pros and cons of every option, not just those you prefer. Be as objective and fair-minded as you can be. When you speak, be purposeful, to the point. The purpose is to hear many points of view and explore many options and solutions. This is a discussion and not a debate. It is opening remarks. It is agenda item, Garrett. And yes, we will have to go out to public comment. As soon as public comment is heard only on opening remarks, we will then move to general instructions and then open it up for public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Please work to stay within the assigned topics of the agenda. So public comment is, anything that you want to share, knowing that the committee members cannot respond and cannot interact. At most we can do is vote to put that on a future agenda. And then agenda item 5, 6, and 7 are topics. And so 5 would be regarding retention and resilience of the RN workforce and faculty in pre-licensure nursing programs. 6 is going to be the academic practice gap, and 7 will be clinical placement impaction and clinical displacement. So I ask that you guys hold your comments for those specific agenda items if they are part of that, but public comment is open so that we can add to it. So at this point, board moderator, we'll go out to public comment for anything on the opening remarks from both Garrett and myself. Thank you.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Committee Chair Chan or Board EO Melby, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Thanks, Mark. Great. Well, let's go ahead and move on to item number 3.0, general instructions for the format of a teleconference meeting. So I'm going to have you take it away, Mark.
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the committee reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered, the committee will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for members to know. Remember, committee members cannot address any item on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at that moment. I'm sorry. Committee members cannot address any item on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at the moment or items that you would like to add to future meetings or term items that will be discussed later in the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when committee members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphone for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. If I understand it, are we supposed to open this for discussion?
We're opening up for public comment for items on the agenda right now. That will work out well.
Yeah, this is Reza. I think you can just go into item 4. Also, if I may, just to I know it's been kind of mentioned, but give a little clarification, kind of to reiterate the general kind of scope of this meeting and differentiate it a little bit from our kind of typical advisory committee meeting. This has been characterized as an interested parties meeting in order to solicit stakeholder input on generally nursing, education, and workforce issues. So there are, agenda items 5, 6, and 7 are kind of specifically described, kind of defined agenda items, and then the upcoming agenda item 4.0 is an opportunity to make public comment for any items that are not on the agenda. As far as the committee members' opportunities to kind of engage and discuss amongst themselves these topics, they're under Bagley-Keene. There's one additional limitation. I appreciate Garrett bringing that up earlier. The Bagley-Keene Act restricts agencies from to only discuss what's on the agenda at a board meeting. So, and in general, I think the intent here is not necessarily to take action on any item that's brought forth. The intent is really, as was kind of mentioned in the agenda, to formulate ideas, develop priorities and things like that, and receive information from the community and stakeholders about what ought to be a priority and get as much input as the committee can on that. So the discussion amongst the committee members today, I think ought to be a little more kind of focused with that in mind, that it's not, the intent is not to run a particular topic to the ground and make a decision on it and take action. Today, it's to establish a list of issues and priorities and things for future agendas to be discussed more fully and have action taken on them. So with that, that's all I wanted to say. I'll turn it over.
Great, thanks, Reza. And can I just clarify that your comments that you just made are really for 4.0, or does it apply to 5, 6?
Kind of yes and no. So technically under Bagley-Keene, you do have more leeway to discuss 5, 6, and 7. 4.0, because it's, if anyone is going to raise a topic in their public comment that's not on the agenda, those topics can only be discussed to the extent that you are considering putting them on a future agenda. 5, 6, and 7, on the other hand, because they're a little more specifically, well, they are specifically described topics, you do have leeway to discuss those in much greater depth, technically to take action. So there is that distinction. I'm glad you brought that up. But I think the overarching spirit of the meeting is, you do have more leeway on those items, and feel free to engage more knowing that. But again, just kind of knowing that the intent is to allow for as much input as possible rather than kind of drilling down on a particular issue and spending a large piece of the time on that. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you so much. So with the direction from Lori and from Reza, let's open up 4.0 to the public. Again, these are for things that are not public comments for items not on the agenda. So if you want us to consider other things in the future, again, things that are not items 5, 6, or 7 on the agenda, now's your time to come forward. We'd love to hear your thoughts, things that you might want us to consider in the future. And you can see in the agenda, the intent of agenda item 4.0. So let's go ahead and open it up then, Mark.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment."
While we pause, just one more clarification for our members of the public. Hopefully, members of the public have had a chance to look at the agenda closely. Again, items 5, 6, and 7 are specifically described. So if your public comment relates to item 5.0 about retention and resilience, or 6.0 about the academic practice gap, or 7.0 about clinical displacements, impaction, and displacement, those comments would be better held until those topics come up. So if your comment is about anything other than any of those, please make it now at this agenda item.
Bryn O'Neill would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I'm Bryn O'Neill from the California Nurses Association, and I'd like to suggest that NUAC should add topics in future interested parties meetings on workforce equity and on educational equity to future agendas. Workforce equity includes programs to ensure cultural competency in the nursing workforce, as well as ways to increase the diversity of the nursing workforce and combat racism and other forms of discrimination against patients and nurses in the workplace. Educational equity includes discussion of ways to support nursing education that's available to potential nurses of all backgrounds, including funding and support for associate's degree in nursing programs, community colleges, and free public education. It's important that NUAC discuss and make recommendations to the BRN on how to ensure that the cost of tuition and educational degree requirements are not a barrier to entry into the nursing profession. Community colleges and ADN programs can and should serve an important role in ensuring that the nursing profession reflects the socioeconomic, geographic, racial, linguistic, and other diversity of California. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Chair Chan, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Excellent. Well, thanks for those remarks. We're going to move on to 5.0, agenda item 5.0, which is discussion regarding retention and resilience of registered nursing workforce and faculty in pre-licensure nursing programs. So this has been identified as one of the subcommittees. And so what we want to do is we want to invite the public as well as the NEWAC committee members to talk about resilience and retention of the nursing workforce and faculty in pre-licensure programs. So I'm going to open it up for discussion. So, and I'm sorry, Lori, I think I might need some help here. Is the first open discussion for the NEWAC members, or do we open it to public? This seems like it's a little bit out of order for me in my head.
Anything that you choose to do, you could just kind of start conversation on it, or you can open it up. There is no rules for this one.
Okay, thanks. Because I was looking at because I have a piece of paper that tells me these are the rules and this is the order, Garrett. Make sure you follow it. And then I got a little stuck. So thank you for your clarification. Reza, do you have any other comments for me?
No, she was correct. The rule is you have to allow public comment for each item. So whether it's, whether it makes more sense for a particular item to do one first or the other is, I think, within your discretion.
Okay.
You could even give, we've done multiple public comments depending on how a conversation goes.
Okay. And before we jump into this, so I guess everybody start gathering your thoughts, the public as well as the NEWAC advisory committee members. And I think what we can do is we can open it up and just see who wants to speak. But as you're starting to gather your thoughts, I just want to give a shout out to Executive Officer Lori Melby. She really pushed, and it wasn't a hard push, but she really advocated for a 4-hour meeting because we want to hear from you. This is your opportunity. We'd love to engage with you. And so I want to thank EO Melby for ensuring that the public has a voice. So thanks, Lori, for that. So with that being said, I guess do committee members, can they raise their hand? I don't know how they identify if they have a comment.
I don't believe the raise hand feature is activated at this point because we're not able to activate it just for panelists. It then goes out to attendees and stuff as well. And then there's crazy kind of things happening with raise hands. So any of the panelists can just come off mute and join the discussion. Just try to be mindful and try not to cut off anybody else. But definitely please open up for discussion if you guys want to start coming off mute and doing as we can. This is a huge focus right now. I know that within the community colleges, they have coined the term faculty crisis, and they were gathering data with that, knowing that the workforce with the faculty pre-licensure nursing programs dwindled tremendously with COVID. And then just looking at the overall retention and resilience of the RN workforce out within the hospitals and the healthcare facilities, et cetera. We did hear from Joanne Spetz at our last board meeting about the effect on that, and that is up on our website as well. And we do that workforce report every few years. So it's up for discussion. Please chime in, and thank you guys for being here to participate.
And real quick, this is Reza. Just a minor ask for our committee members. If when you are wanting to speak, if you have a camera and the ability to go on camera, when you're speaking, if you could do that, please, that would be helpful, I think, for everybody.
Great, thank you. So I would like to kick things off, and then and partly it's because it's just so new. So as I mentioned earlier, some of you may have heard, I just came back from Washington, D.C. Health Impact, which is the organization that I am the CEO and president of, is the California Nursing Workforce and Policy Center. And I was the co-chair of the National Forum of State Nursing Workforce Centers annual conference. We held the conference Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week. And retention and resilience of RNs and the faculty was a major thread throughout the whole program. And so when the subcommittee is ready to look at some of the amazing presentations from across the country in terms of the issues and the solutions, then I would point the co-chairs of the subcommittee to the National Forum of State Nursing Workforce Centers website, because we will have the presentations, and the whole agenda is still on. Will be up for quite some time, actually, with the PowerPoint presentations embedded in the agenda. So I would just encourage the co-chairs of the subcommittee, when they're ready, to look at that, because there's a lot that's happening and a lot of things that we need to take in consideration. With that, I'm going to first see if there's any other advisory committee members that want to speak. And if you do, please take yourself off mute, and that will give me the indication that you would like to say something. Carmen.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. I'll be quick because, you know, we want to hear from the public here. You know, on this agenda point, I kind of, you know, it's interesting that we're kind of putting together both the faculty pre-licensure issues and the workforce retention and resilience pieces. And I just kind of wanted to tease out a little bit more the retention and resilience piece. And I think, you know, with workforce issues, you know, as someone who represents nurses who work at the bedside all the time, and particularly during COVID, you know, I just want us to be real careful when we're talking about resilience issues, because we can't be asking registered nurses to do more with less. And I think, you know, as NEWAC, we really should try to figure out ways that, you know, within the BRN's authority, how the BRN can really support, you know, safer workplaces so that nurses don't leave the bedside. And I think that's really important. You know, when nurses don't have safe staffing, when they don't have safe working conditions, we know that nurses have moral distress, they have moral injury, they can't practice under their licenses as registered nurses and meet their duties to their patients. And what happens is that nurses leave the bedside. And I think that's fundamental in this issue about retention and resilience of the registered nursing workforce, is that why are nurses leaving the bedside? They are leaving the bedside because they cannot take care of their patients, and they know that, and they don't want to keep on working as registered nurses if they're going to violate their duties under their licenses. And I think that's how these issues of workforce really tie into the role of the BRN, and we can try to figure that, you know, as NEWAC, we really should try to figure out ways in which the BRN can support working nurses who are at, you know, on the floors, seeing, you know, experiencing COVID, experiencing the next pandemics, experiencing you know, the other healthcare crises that may come. So, you know, I just want us to think about those issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Carmen. I very much value your comments. Just as a way of kind of piggybacking on that, I had a research study published with some colleagues from UC Irvine. It was just published last month. The The first author is Candace Burton, Burton. If you just type in Burton and Chan, you can find our publication on moral injury of nurses, especially during COVID, and the reasons why they were leaving direct care practice. It was a study that was done across all of California. And so I would encourage the co-chairs to consider that study. As I said, it was published last month in I think, Psychological Trauma, which was the journal. Before we move on, I just want to also welcome Janine Graves. Janine Graves, thank you for being here. Janine is the vice chair of NEWAC, and so for the record, I wanted to just say that she is present. So thanks, Janine.
Thank you. I was on the phone earlier due to a clinical situation, but able to sit down at the laptop now. Thanks, Garrett.
Absolutely. Any other advisory committee members that are interested in speaking before we open it up to the public? Tanya, Dr. Altman.
Hi, good morning. Tanya Altman, I am the educational person that's on the CACN, which is representing colleges and universities of nursing. First, I want to start with a shout out to UC Davis. They just got a $6 million grant to help with funding to pay for some people to be faculty. And so that hopefully it's a 5-year grant, and hopefully that will help a little bit with trying to get things. But one of the things that we really need to start working on is either increasing salary for faculty or doing some sort of joint appointments with hospitals. And I think that also speaks to the workload of the staff nurse. If they're part of their workload as a staff nurse 1 day a week is faculty versus being faculty in addition to full-time staff nurse, that might help with the workload issues. We need faculty. I was part of the local Sacramento SACAN nursing workforce meetings, and every single school of nursing in the Sacramento area is looking for at least med-surg faculty, if not other faculty. So it's rampant around here is the faculty shortage. And what we have is a high turnover. And that, I think, also leads to the retention and resilience of the registered nursing, because if the faculty aren't consistent faculty, our students aren't getting a consistent education. They're getting somebody that comes in and pilots in for a semester and then pilots out. And so that's also an issue for sustaining the quality of the nursing education, which gives the student the strong foundation to be a resilient nurse that wants to stay in the profession. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya, for your comments. I see Wendy off mute. Wendy, please.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Garrett. I want to echo what Tanya was just addressing. We do have a bit of a revolving door with faculty as well, and it does contribute to some curricular drift. Faculty often are excited to teach and then realize that it's a little bit different teaching than it is precepting. But there also is an issue with salaries and faculty. And we have a hard time recruiting people to come teach when they can earn a substantial more working at the bedside. So salary is probably one of the biggest battles that we fight in trying to retain nurses who want to teach. Most nurses will not entirely leave the bedside to come teach because there simply isn't enough money in it. But we also need to work on faculty preparation. We know that at least at the university levels, we are not prepared. Unless we have a grant, we do not have the funds available to do faculty orientation, which in my opinion denies the fact that education has a set of competencies, just like clinical care has a set of competencies. And in order to prepare the faculty workforce, we need to find ways that we can help them develop these competencies. And finally, I want to just agree that if we can look at some overlap, some joint appointments where faculty and our clinical partners have some joint appointments for staff nurses and educators. That might be a very nice solution to a lot of this.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And can I just reconfirm, because in my head I had you with the CSU Chancellor's Office. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. We will make note of that, because I think in agenda item 2.0 in the meeting materials, I'm sorry, it says College Chancellor's Office Representative, but it is about more of the CSU representative, right? Okay. So maybe it was just my misread. But one of the things, Wendy, you bring up excellent points. And one of the things that I have always wondered, and this is anecdotal information, so please, I want you to correct me if you have the information, but if you don't, maybe you could look into it, is that it's my understanding that, let's say the School of Business and the faculty in the School of Business have a separate salary scale than other faculties in other schools within the CSU system. And so I'm wondering if there could be some advocacy in that arena to say, well, if the schools of business within the CSU have different salary scales, could that also be applied to faculty in schools of nursing?
So yes, I have heard that as well. I think one of the challenges to that argument, if I were to argue the other side, is that schools of nursing are already enormously expensive. And so, and I'll make an example. We know that when our clinical sites, again, speaking to the resilience of registered nurses at the clinical site, when they reduce the numbers of students that they will allow per clinical group, because they frankly, you know, they're trying to bring preceptors in, they're overloaded with people they need to precept. So they limit the numbers of students. That increases the number of clinical groups we need to have per cohort, which often ends up additionally adding another faculty. So our costs over the last few years for clinical faculty has skyrocketed. So it's very difficult to make the argument over salaries, say, for example, in comparison to the business school, when our own salaries, our budget for our personnel has already significantly increased. So it's a difficult ask to administration. And it's not, unfortunately, it's not a direct comparison. So it's challenging.
Yeah, excellent. I very much appreciate that other viewpoint. Thank you so much. Hazel, I see you're off mute.
Thank you, Garrett. I just wanted, this is a topic that is obviously very interesting to a lot of us. So I have two thoughts. One is a little bit on the logistics side, because I'm already part of another subcommittee of NEWAC, and was just wondering, aside from this interested parties meeting, if the subcommittee meeting specifically for this, if they're going to bring it back to any of our future meetings, or how could we be involved with more of those conversations in the future without having the interested parties meeting. So that's one question, and that might be more of a, again, like a logistics. So I do want to give my thoughts on the subject. As much as I think this by itself is an important aspect of work that needs to be reviewed, I think there's opportunity perhaps to look at, it looks like there's two separate things, two separate groups that we're working at, audiences, if you would, for this particular discussion point. One is the workforce and the other one is the faculty. So just perhaps a thought for anybody who is going to be the subcommittee leads, that we kind of ensure that we are addressing both in a way that benefits both the workforce, the practice environment, if you would, as well as that of the academic environment. There are some of us, I will call myself out, I am a big proponent of utilizing our academic and practice partnerships, whether in micro communities or in general, such as this forum, in order to move some of this work forward. Just wanting to be mindful that these are both big, very big workforce issues and faculty issues. So thank you.
Hazel, I will address your first question. The purpose of the subcommittees is to have the ability to work outside of a scheduled NEWAC committee meeting, so that they can meet, 5, 6, 7 times a week if they choose to. There's no limit to that. It's the two of them working together. They can meet with the public. They can meet with anybody that they choose to. They just cannot have conversations with any of the NEWAC members, because that would then have greater than 2 people, and it would constitute where we would have to notice a public meeting for that to occur, or we may be in violation of Bagley-Keene. The purpose of the subcommittee is to allow for those that work to get done, because we only have 2 NEWAC meetings a year. This is an extra one for interested party. And if we just stuck with the 2 meetings a year, we would never get anything accomplished. On the scheduled meetings where we actually notice, all of the subcommittees will be reporting out to NEWAC. And so at that point, when the subcommittees report out, all of the NEWAC committee members will have the ability to ask questions, interject, add additional information that they think may be relevant and could have been missed, offer a different opinion, etc. And ultimately, if everything comes to a consensus, make recommendations to our board. So you will absolutely have a chance to have ample participation in all of these topics during the scheduled NEWAC meetings, just not part of the individual subcommittees, so that the subcommittee groups can move these topics forward and get things accomplished.
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Hazel. I've made note of your second comment and things that we should think about as the subcommittee continues to roll out. The 2 things. One was, how do we separate the nursing workforce from the faculty workforce? Just so that we actually, health impact, we view it as distinct and also jointly together. You can't have a nursing workforce without faculty. And so it's kind of this domino effect. So while they're distinctly different, they're also connected. And so we'll see how that plays out as NEWAC continues to do their work. But I value your contributions and your perspectives, so thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we move on? No? Okay, great. I don't see anybody else on the committee coming off of mute. Please feel free to do so at any time. And the reason why I'm doing it this way is because it's the only way that I'm able to manage the 2 groups. So I guess now we can open it up to the public for comment, and we welcome your perspectives. So Mark, can you help us?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Bryn O'Neill would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello again, Bryn O'Neill, CNA. I'm encouraged to hear committee members talk about the moral distress and moral injury that are leading nurses to leave the bedside. RNs really need workforce protections to ensure that they can provide safe patient care in accordance with the licensure and duties under the Nursing Practice Act. We really can't just ask RNs to be resilient in the face of the same conditions that they've been dealing with. So the new act should explore ways that the BRN can support nurses to be patient advocates, including objecting to unsafe healthcare facility policies and practices. So to retain nurses, California really needs to strengthen enforcement and support of California's life-saving mandatory minimum registered nurse to patient staffing ratios law and other laws that help nurses meet their professional responsibilities and duties of patient advocacy as RNs. For example, NUAC could explore ways that the BRN could help support RN ratios enforcement by supporting legislation or other efforts by the state to create conditions on state-supported health facility funds. Importantly, NUAC can explore ways that the BRN can support and protect nurses who, in their professional judgment and assessment of their patients' conditions, may refuse or object to patient care models that are unsafe, which includes team nursing models, acute hospital care at home, or the use of shadow beds to place patients in areas of the hospitals like hallways, waiting rooms, etc., and other crisis standards of care in hospitals and healthcare facilities. Some of these dangerous healthcare administration practices can result in unsafe staffing levels and unsafe patient care conditions that place the RN's license at risk, and they can lead to that moral injury and moral distress that we talked about that is leading nurses to leave the bedside. Thank you.
Bryn, this is Lori, the executive officer. I just wanted to make one comment. Thank you for bringing this information forward. I want to make sure that we have a clear understanding what the Board of Registered Nursing has the ability to do. The Board of Registered Nursing operates under the Nurse Practice Act, which is Title 16. California Department of Public Health has the Title 22, which is the staffing ratios. So just for clarity here, we hear you. This information is valuable, but understand that the Board of Registered Nursing has no influence on any staffing ratios, any of the issues that come around staffing. Those fall under the California Department of Public Health and are under the laws that are the California Code of Regulations, Title 22. Again, we're under the California Code of Regulations, Title 16. So please continue to bring this information forward, but I just wanted to set expectations on what the board can or cannot do related to staffing ratios. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Marianne Hicks would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello and good morning. This is Marianne Hicks from Las Medanas College. I would just like to make a comment since resiliency had been a big word in these important conversations. And I would just like to provide my feedback regarding resiliency. I think when we talk about resiliency, I think now that we're conversing about this, that we kind of be in the same page about its true definition and not equate it to a negative connotation of martyrdom or self-sacrifice, but rather including all the other factors that contribute to resiliency, such as like in nursing education, we try to emphasize that we're training our nursing students with self-discipline, time management from the beginning to the end of their nursing program, and also helping train them with advocacy and assertiveness to advocate for nursing practice. In addition, the okay, I forgot my train of thought. Sorry. Like I said, the assertiveness. These are very important in promoting resiliency and the different types, most especially of the support that they need to be resilient, such as mental health support. Do they even have the proper family support during nursing education if they have children, especially with the rigor of nurse education, because this will transfer on from their nursing education journey to their practice. So I think when we talk about resiliency and promoting it, we should not connotate it with self-sacrifice or martyrdom. The second comment that I would like to add would be the faculty pay, because I do work for a community college, and there seems to be some inequity in the pay between faculty who teaches didactics and those with skills and simulation lab, and the definition for science lab for these community colleges, the definition seems to have been created many years ago, and there's no modification and no consideration in nursing education. And I think community colleges should look into this. And in community colleges, it's so complex because you have to go through the politics and bureaucracy with academic senate and nursing, and the United Faculty. I don't think nursing is not even involved in those negotiations. And at least from our school, in our district, with simulation lab, as we all know, if we want to have the best practice in nursing education with high fidelity, the training is very extensive and very complex. But the community college equate the nursing simulation lab to equate it with science lab 2, which is equivalent to biology and automotive lab. So I'm not sure if everyone else is experiencing the same thing, but this is very inequitable for our nursing faculty. And I'm not quite sure what the BRN can help with this one, but at least I hope the community colleges would be unanimous in supporting each other in terms of this inequity. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Jen Ellis would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Jen Ellis, Miss Ellis, would you like to make a comment?
Reza and Lori, I guess I see that Miss Ellis would like to make a comment. She typed it in. Is it acceptable to read it, or does she have to speak it herself?
There may be some technical difficulties where maybe they don't have a microphone and they're not able to speak. We do try to attempt to have them speak for themselves, and if it is not possible, we do have the ability to read the comment aloud.
Thank you. So Ms. Ellis, if you would like to speak your comment out loud, that would be great. If not, and you don't have the ability to, or you choose not to, which is totally fine too, I'm happy to read your comment for the record. In the interest of time, let me read it and then feel free to expand. I mean, if you can come off that mute, or if you do have access to the microphone, that's fine. Just for the record, Jen Ellis says in her comment, I agree with Wendy's comments related to retention of faculty and training of new faculty. I have 25 years of nursing experience and would like to give back to nursing via teaching. However, every time I apply for a faculty position, I'm turned away because I have no formal faculty time under my belt. If there was a portal or flow to allow nurses to enter faculty positions, we could open up a portal for new faculty to help balance the faculty vacancies.
so I can provide additional clarification on that. Our academic partners each have various rules that they must follow in regards to their specific faculty. Some are based on an institutional policy and some are based on accrediting policy. And some are based on like the CSU's chancellor's requirements or the community college's chancellor's requirements, etc. The Board of Registered Nursing is the entity that approves all faculty for all nursing programs, pre-licensure nursing programs throughout the state. There, we are advocates of entry into the profession, and we allow for many ways to become a faculty member. If you have an RN license, there is no degree requirement at all. You can have 1 year of experience in the content area, and I'll clarify what the 5 content areas are at this particular moment in regulation and statute, and that is med-surg, OB, peds, psych, mental health, and GERI. If you have 1 year of working within those specialty areas, regardless of your degree, you can become approved as a clinical teaching assistant. That person typically helps out in laboratory settings, accompanies a clinical instructor to a clinical site and does med passes or treatments as the instructor on part of the clinical unit, helps other students with assessment or accompanying them to an off rotation, etc. So that clinical teaching assistant has 0 degree requirement and only 1 year of experience in a content area to be approved to assist with teaching. A lot of times that is the first step into nursing academia. You get exposed to it, you realize you like it, and you may choose to advance your degree at that point. The next entry level into a faculty position is for the Board of Registered Nursing is called an assistant instructor. The assistant instructor requires that you have a bachelor's degree in nursing, along with the same requirement for the clinical teaching assistant, the 1 year in direct patient care as part of the content area again, the med-surg, OB, psych, mental health, peds, OB, etc. So with that, you have a bachelor's degree, you are now assistant instructor. As an assistant instructor, you can take and manage your own clinical group. You can be the clinical instructor at the facility. You can guest lecture in a theory. You can work in the lab. You can do simulation, etc. Those are allowable under the BRN. The caveat is you do not assign grades and you communicate and report and work very closely with your lead instructor. And so you are not the instructor of record that gives the granting of grades. You work with that instructor of record and provide that information. The final level for faculty approval that the BRN has is the instructor level. There are 2 ways to enter into that instructor level. That instructor level requires that you have a master's degree in nursing, and additionally, the 1 year of bedside experience in the content area. So that 1 year bedside experience at content area within the last 5 years is required for all faculty, whether you're a clinical teaching assistant, an assistant instructor, or an instructor through the BRN. The degree requirement is what differentiates you between the assistant instructor, the clinical teaching instructor, and now the instructor level. The instructor level can be obtained after working as an assistant instructor with a master's degree, teaching 1 academic year. Or you can go directly into an instructor level.
Oh, Lori, I can't. Are you with us? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry. I think you broke up for a second.
Okay, sorry. As an instructor, you can enter directly as a instructor if you have a RN teaching experience as part of your practicum in education. So with that, those are the 3 entry points for the BRN. Currently, we have reached out to legislative representatives to see if we can provide for a direct entry into faculty.
Garrett, I think we lost her.
Okay.
I'm not sure what's going on here. Sorry about that, guys.
Oh, okay. No problem.
I'm going to see if I could turn off video and see what's happening here. So I'm going to stop my video and see if this is better. Is that better? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I am going off camera. I apologize for you, everybody, for that. And I will try to address some. So with the various levels of entry into
No. Do you hear anything?
No. So it sounds like the BRN is looking for maybe some, if I may summarize while Lori's coming back, there are a lot of regulations that guide the BRN in terms of faculty recognition and approval. And so she's talking from, if anybody's interested, you can look into Title 16 of the California Code of Regulations, Section 1425, which kind of lists everything in writing as Lori has been, that she's been describing. And it sounds like they're looking to have some way to do a direct entry for faculty, which would be incredibly helpful. I don't know anything about that, but, and Lori, I hope you are able to hear me. So when you can come back online, we would love to hear more about that.
Garrett, did you see the other comment from Jen Ellis?
I'm sorry. I just saw the comment. Thanks, Mark. Jen Ellis wrote a second entry. I also agree that faculty positions hold a set of competencies that are different than frontline nursing. If anyone knows of a school of nursing willing to train up a skilled nurse, please reach out to me via LinkedIn. I know a handful of nurses that do not want to leave the bedside, however, wish to find a new way to give back to the nursing community. I just want to say, Jen, that Health Impact, has a program. So if you go to the healthimpact.org website, we have a 30 CE course that helps nurses become clinical faculty. We've worked with a very famous nurse educator, Dr. Patricia Benner. I did my PhD with Dr. Benner at UCSF, and she and I have come up with a clinical faculty and educator program that helps nurses develop their practice of teaching. We agree with your comment that the competencies and the practice of nursing is different than the practice of teaching. And so this course is intended to help address that, that development of faculty practice. So, and I'm not sure, is it legal for me to send an email, Reza, through LinkedIn to Ms. Ellis, or is it not?
I'm sorry, to who?
So Jen Ellis, she wrote a comment in the chat, and she asked if anybody knew of anything to got her in LinkedIn. Is it legal for me to reach out to her?
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I will do so. Lori, are you with us? I
don't see her in the list of panelists. It may be that she dropped off. She may be perhaps calling in from a phone.
Okay.
That's what I would presume, or otherwise working to sort it out. But and we'll certainly revisit what she was talking about if that's something that the panel wants to get into later. But I think you can move on while
Okay.
she's getting back on.
She is trying to get back on. We do have one more person who wants to make a comment. Karen Kalinga. 1 second, please.
Hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Karen Kalunga. I'm the director of a children's hospital in California. And the nurse practitioners that work in my department are very short-staffed. I know we're advanced practice nursing, but this short staffing and resiliency issue does fall into the advanced practice departments because we are very short-staffed and having a lot of issues with resiliency and lots of vacancies. With regards to the pediatric realm and that specialty, we have particularly difficult time with recruitment. And once we do find nurse practitioners, they're usually straight out of school awaiting licensure. And there's a lot of issues with trying to establish a good pipeline for precepting new nurse practitioners as students, which further puts more pressure on the established nurse practitioners in the clinical settings to expand their responsibilities and further deteriorates their resiliency in their workforce. But the difficulty and challenges that we've had with recruitment, I think where the BRN can help us out a bit, I don't know if there's any way to improve the efficiency with moving the licensure along with regards to the nurse practitioner license and the NPF, the furnishing license. If I am lucky enough to hire a new nurse practitioner straight out of school, it can take 3 to 4 months to obtain their NP license and their furnishing license, which then puts us 3 to 4 months behind with regards to credentialing to the hospital, which takes another 3 months. So really, if I hire a new nurse practitioner, it can take 6 months to even get them to a start date because of this delay. So I don't know if the BRN has a committee that can work on improving the efficiency of getting these licenses and certifications put out in a more timely manner. That would help the workforce considerably, take a lot of pressure off of staffing, and which would improve ability to precept students and, improve that pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm joined via my phone right now. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Thank you. Perfect. So I can address that. We actually just did a big overhaul of our APRN licensing unit. We did review the nurse practitioner application, as well as furnishing and Schedule 2. That just went into place. The changes went into place about 2 weeks ago. So we are hoping that you guys will start to see a very quick turnaround on approvals, and you will see that things will move much faster through the system. So stay tuned, and we welcome feedback on the updated process in a couple months. Hopefully you guys will be able to give us some great feedback and let us know if it's working.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Lori, that's super great news. I would love to see the BRN highlight that news. I mean, letting the public know. So anything that you think might be possible to let people know, hey, look, we have heard, we are responsive. Do you have a news blast or anything out like that?
We do not yet. We did make note of this at our last board meeting in May, where it was put out on the meeting materials as well as presented in the board meeting. It was kind of a soft launch. We wanted to make sure that it went well and we saw the changes implemented and kind of see the calls to our public information unit decrease. And if all of that goes well, we will do a blast out to all of the nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, et cetera, and go out to the organizations as well. We do have some other IT fixes in the works. Right now, the nurse practitioner programs and the nurse midwife programs within California can upload the education information directly to Breeze through a portal that they have access to. There is a form that is required in regulation that is a program verification and an advanced pharmacology verification. We are adding that to that portal so that will all be done and there will not be a paper trail for that, in hopes to make every California graduate, whether pre-licensure, nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, clinical nurse specialist, to be able to have an automated approval process through our board by utilizing that, because our nursing education consultants have already reviewed all of the programs and the course content, and we know that they meet our criteria. So more to come. We are absolutely aware of the issues and we are working diligently to get them fixed and make it as streamlined as possible for all of our California schools.
Thank you, Lori. And I just want to make sure that the BRN gets credit where credit is due. And so the more that, and I'm glad that you reported it out in the BRN meeting, and I couldn't make the last meeting, I had a conflict. But let's keep on getting that news out. So whenever you think is the right time, I think news blasts or emails just would be incredibly helpful for the public to know that the BRN is working hard on that. And we very much appreciate that, because as you know, and I've spoken about this before, time to licensure does have an impact on the workforce. And so the BRN is, I know, taking it very seriously. And if I understood Karen Rizal, I think the BRN, if I understood, in this fiscal year got some monies from HCI to help look at that. Is that correct? Or Lori?
Yes. Yeah, we were. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. Department of Consumer Affairs received the monies from HCI, and it was designated out to the 2 nursing boards. And so that is BVNPT as well as BRN. And we are working with DCA to get those monies allocated and people hired and work on that. As part of that money, it also went to OIS, which is our IT that is through DCA and agency. And they will be working with us on a lot of upgrades within the BRN and BVNPT in regards to expediting licensure. I did see in the comments as well that there was a question about out-of-state programs. Out-of-state programs will not have that same pathway in. Our nursing education consultants do not review out-of-state programs, out-of-state curriculum, out-of-state requirements. And each of the 50 states and 4 territories have their own Nursing Practice Act. Within their own Nursing Practice Act, they establish statewide what their education requirements are, what their licensing requirements are, and what their scope of practice is. and those are different from each state to state. So we cannot do a blanket approval for access into licensure in California. Each applicant does need to have a thorough review with information received primary source, so direct from the education center or direct from the license, the board certification. And so we did look at those processes within the advanced practice, and we did streamline that as well. So for all of the advanced practice, which is nurse, midwife, nurse practitioner, clinical nurse specialist, and CRNAs, we tried to align as close as possible for each and every one of them. CRNAs are a little kind of one-off, as they only have entry into the state of California through national certification. And so we do require proof of national certification as well as education program verification. And then we did go ahead and copy that over for the nurse practitioner, clinical nurse specialist, and CNM, that they would just have to turn in for out of state the copy of their national certification and proof of their education preparation, whether that be through transcripts received and program verification, et cetera. And so that was streamlined, and a lot of the additional information that had been requested in the past is no longer required for both licensure and furnishing.
Great, thanks so much, Lori. Karen, I do see that you wanted to make another comment, but before we do that, I'd just like Karen Rizal to, because I think it's important for the public to know that our tax dollars are actually going directly to solving issues of, especially in nursing. So Karen, I'd like for you to just make a comment, and then we'll go back to Karen in just a moment.
Yes, no, thank you, and appreciate that. Yes, and we were really delighted to be able to, with the funding that we received, to support the acceleration of licensing for nursing and the partnership with Consumer Affairs. We are also, we have just, an additional, the funding that HCI has received to support the nursing workforce, to support the expansion of nursing programs, and support the scholarships and loan repayment for nursing students. So we are, really pleased to be able to be partnering with all of you and looking for ways that we can, increase the number of nurses trained, to increase the diversity of the nursing workforce, to accelerate the training, and to and look at innovative ways that we're all discussing today as to what we can do more of, right? What we can do differently to really be thinking about how do we address some of the issues raised.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you again for your advocacy as the Deputy Director. You've been instrumental in helping us move our initiatives forward for California, and again, good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, right? This is making a difference. You are making a change, and thank you.
No, thank you.
Ms. Kalunga, can we come back to you? So, because I see that you wanted to make another comment, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me a little bit more time. I do want to say thank you for addressing this issue, and I would like to acknowledge that I didn't realize that there was such a difference between a California graduate and a non-California graduate, but I have seen a difference in the California graduates. Most recently, we had an NP come through, and she was able to, a new NP, and she received her NP and NPF within 2 weeks of applying for it. So that was great. She was a California graduate. My particular challenge is with neonatal nurse practitioners, because we only have one neonatal nurse practitioner program in the state of California. Most recently, we will be having another one in Southern California opening up. But as of most recently, we only had one up in Northern California. So most of the neonatal nurse practitioners attend school outside of California, but they are California residents with RN licenses in California. And this is where the big delay is that I'm seeing, taking 3 to 4 months to get their NP and NPF. So I am happy to hear that it sounds like there are some improvements in that realm, and I hope that will continue. I haven't seen a big improvement as far as timing goes on my end, but hopefully that will come. I realize that the nurse practitioners who do get their education outside of California do have to have their national certification prior to getting their NP and NPF, which there is a slight delay in that, I realize. But yeah, if the BRN can continue to work on efficiently getting them pushed through and getting their licensure, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely. That is our goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Karen, I just want 2 questions back to you, if I may. One is, when you introduced yourself, I wasn't sure. I heard Children's Hospital, but I wasn't sure which Children's Hospital it was. And then the second question that I would love to know, if you happen to know this, and you may not know this, is were any of the students who lived in California who attended an NP program outside of the state, do you happen to know if any of them did their clinicals within California? And the reason I'm asking for this is because in Title 16, Section 1486, I helped work with Dr. Susie Phillips from UC Irvine provide the BRN with our suggested regulatory language for nurse practitioner education. We inserted, based off of the request by the BRN at the time, to ensure that any nurse practitioner student who was doing their clinical rotations within California be overseen by the BRN. We believe the BRN is very important to oversee any out-of-state school who places students in California meet the requirements set forth by the BRN. And so 1486 requires the clinical experience from an out-of-state student, or I'm sorry, an in-state student in an out-of-state program, in an approved program. And so this might be something, Lori, that might be a future phase, that if you're already reviewing some of those schools, might that also help potentially facilitate the licensure? It may or it may not. I'm not saying it should, but maybe that's another thing to maybe look at in the future.
Yeah, as of right now, it would not affect that, because we do have the 2 methods for licensure. One is licensure from a California approved program, method 1, and 2 is if they're not a California approved program, they would have to come in through national certification. So all out of state do come in through national certification. That is also in alignment with all the other states in the nation, with the exception of 1. Kentucky and California are the only 2 states that allow for licensure without national certification. I do think that that will change in the future so that we can better align and move towards independent practice. So at this point, I don't know that changing that process up would really be beneficial when you're projecting out to the future. So I think the plans at this moment is to stick with the national board certification for any non-board approved program to come in and get APR and licensure within California.
So, but if these people had national board certification who went to an out-of-state school and they have that national certification, what is the expected timeline then of their licensure in California, if that's the other method?
It is the other method, and it depends on how quickly we get that national certification. It is primary source document. It does have to come from the certifying agencies, and then that will be processed through. We are exploring many other options on that to see if we can get maybe direct access into the national certifying agencies so that we can do a direct verification, kind of like what we do with nurses through NCSBN for our RN licensure. So that is something that we are exploring, but at this point, that is not something that is available to us. The other part though is that we did just refine all of the documents that need to be turned in and decreased them exponentially. So again, that was only implemented about 2 weeks ago. So I do not have a time frame of how well that went and how quickly that has changed the licensing. I do know right now that board staff is going through all of the previously deemed deficient applications and are reviewing with the new guidelines and providing certification for NP, NPF, et cetera, now. And so hopefully with the cleanup and continuing to process them thoroughly in this new manner, we will see some changes, and I'll be able to report how it changes in timeline as soon as we have that. Still very, very, very new process.
Karin, does that help you? I just want to make sure. Mark, is Karin off mute?
Hi, yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I couldn't unmute. Yes, that definitely helps. And to answer your question, I'm from Loma Linda University Children's Hospital in California. And yes, we try to hire the students that come through and the nurse practitioners work with in precepting. So most of their clinicals, if not all of them, are done with us in California.
Cool, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So let's keep us surprised, right? We want to hear from you, and hopefully over the next few months, as the board staff continue to solidify their soft launch, this will hopefully be good for all. And I also want to elevate the board staff and thank them for their hard work. The BRN has known for some time that time to licensure has been challenging, but I want to celebrate your work, Lori, and your staff's work. So let's keep on making that front and center to celebrate you. Okay, Mark, I feel like, did we capture everyone who has wanted to? Oh, Jen, just to, again, go to the Health Impact website. It's the Benner Institute for Teaching and Learning. So just look for the course in the Benner Institute for Teaching and Learning. So it's one of the programs within Health Impact. So, Mark,
we are clear.
Okay,
we
great.
are clear. Would you like me to close this window?
Before I close the window, again, I'm sorry, this is new. This process is new for me. So I want to go back to the committee to see if any committee members want to say anything or have any additional thoughts. Please feel free to come off mute and we can.
As we wait for committee members to come off mute and interject, I just want to make sure I follow up really quick, Garrett, with my technical difficulties. Were there any questions that I missed that you would like me to clear up, or are we good to move forward?
Oh yeah, no, actually there was something that you said that was super interesting, which was the direct entry to faculty for faculty. Yes. So please, can you share a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. That was something that we presented in the Sunset Bill for discussion, but we were pretty late to the game on that, so it was not picked up on our Sunset Bill. But what we looked at is right now faculty approval is about a 10-step process, and it really is not conducive to getting faculty in. Currently, the process is that you have to
open up and advertise at the academic institution for faculty. People apply. They're not necessarily approved as faculty through the BRN. They could be, but they aren't necessarily that way. Then they go through the interview process. They're chosen for hire. And only at that point does the director of nursing submit for faculty approval to the BRN. It is done through the academic institution and not done by the individual licensee. When it is done through the academic institution, you may have, and I know this is a huge exaggeration because of the faculty crisis, say you have 5 applicants that are interested in the one position. The only person that is chosen for hire is the only one that goes to the BRN. So there could have potentially been 5 faculty approvals that the BRN could have done, but instead only one was submitted to the BRN. There is also chances that that one applicant that made it through and was chosen for hire may not meet the faculty requirements, and we would then deny them after the academic institution has already approved them for hire. That becomes incredibly problematic as well. So through that process, we reevaluated that. Unfortunately, it is in regulation. And so we do need to have a law change for that, which is why we pursued legislative staff to see if they would be willing to carry a bill through us. Nobody picked it up this year, but we are hopeful for next year. And what that would do is change that process and be very similar to the teaching credentialing process, where if you want to be a teacher, you have the qualifications and the education, you apply directly to the board. The board then would evaluate that. We would then approve you as the different levels, clinical teaching assistant, assistant instructor, or instructor. It would be shown on your DCA license lookup. So when you look up Garrett Chan, it would say Garrett Chan is an instructor in psych, and you're good to go. And so then at that point, it changes the way that faculty are managed throughout the state. When you apply for your job, you're qualified. You have that license to be faculty versus gaining that ability after you are chosen for hire. So if we can flip that process, I think that would definitely have a huge impact on faculty availability throughout California. The other thing that we did with faculty is we assigned the faculty approvals to the RN license. RN licensure is required to be faculty. So now we will be able to pull data on where the faculty is located throughout the state. And we're hoping to be able to track that annually to show faculty growth or faculty recession by region. The other thing that we're hoping to be able to do with an IT fix is allow for reports to be pulled. I'm on several listservs where people will say, I'm in need of a med-surg instructor. Does anybody have one? Well, now that your faculty approval is tied to your license in Breeze, the hope is that a director of nursing can log in, pull a listing of all of the med-surg instructors in their region, and then be able to make contact with them and do kind of a mass marketing saying, hey, come to College of the Canyons, we need you, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of our hope. We do have the foundation laid where your license is in Breeze. Your faculty approval is tied to that. There are still some IT advances that we need to do, but the biggest one is we need legislation to pick up on our proposal to allow for direct access faculty approval through the licensing process and take it away from academia, so that academia, when they have applicants apply, they are qualified by licensure, just like we do through our K through 12 teachers.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Lori. And we look forward to future developments on that. I see Wendy has come off mute. Can we go to Wendy?
Yes, thank you, Garrett. First of all, I live in this world every day in getting faculty approved. And I do want to congratulate the board, because the new process where approvals are linked to the licenses, while it's still in a developing stage, not all of it's there yet, but I do appreciate that process. That will save all of us a lot of time, I think, in the long run. So I appreciate that improvement. Where I find sometimes I have challenges is in the language in the regulation, excuse me, where it says that it has to be direct patient care. And I think I find sometimes interested nurses come to me, 20 years of experience, maybe working as a CNS or as the resource nurse on the unit, or doing all the orientation for new nurses at their hospitals. I'm finding that some of those folks are being denied because they haven't been at the bedside doing shift work for the last 5 years. They've either been doing resource work, or they're the CNS who is teaching all of the nurses coming into the organization how to do patient care. And I think that there's some opportunities there perhaps to have a discussion about what clinical expertise at the bedside, how it can present in different ways is I guess what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will also say though that I have greatly, as you know, Loretta, greatly appreciated the work that I've been able to have with my NEC and the supervisor and yourself. And I do, it is my perception and my belief that the BRN really is trying to work very closely with us, and I do appreciate that.
We are, thank you. And I'll just provide a couple points of clarification. It doesn't say that you have to have bedside experience. It says direct patient care experience within previous 5 years in the nursing area to which he or she will be assigned. And so with that, it is direct patient care experience. It does not have to be necessarily at the bedside. So if you apply and you show that you have this direct patient care experience 1 year within the last 5 years, our NECs will take a look at it, evaluate it, and see that it meets. We did institute a process called a second review for anybody that is denied a faculty approval. And so we have moved to that, and the supervising nursing education consultants have reviewed each one of the denials to ensure that there was no possible way that we would be able to grant that. If it is a CNS and they drop into staffing like you said, resource nurse, et cetera, those all qualify. Absolutely, for this direct patient care experience within the previous 5 years. And so if you running into difficulties with that, if you're getting outright denials and you don't think that they are correct, go ahead and ask for a second review, and the NECs and the supervising NECs will make sure to evaluate that. We do accept volunteer hours. We do accept many different methods to qualify for that direct patient care. That also has been a recent change within about the last 6 to 8 months where that was implemented. So if you're still receiving some difficulty and such, just reach out and we will continue to work with that and refine that. I did meet with all of the accrediting agencies, ASIN, CCNE, NLN, CNEA, and we are in alignment with their requirement for that recency. And so I think, just the better way that we can get that streamlined and move through. And if you have any questions, I think it would just be of benefit, and the accrediting agencies would approve and appreciate that as well.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Lori. Janine, I saw that you came off mute, and I want to make sure that I didn't miss you. Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Garrett. Yes, I just wanted to echo Wendy and Tanya's comments. Having just written the first tuition check for my college-age child this fall, it's so hard for me to understand these academic institutions that don't pay their nursing faculty a competitive rate. It's just criminal. These are taxpayer dollars. These are private citizen dollars. There's a lot of money going into these academic institutions, and nursing is a leading program in many of them. And I just have spoken to so many fabulous educators that simply cannot afford to teach. And so I don't know what the mechanism is, because all I hear about are these new and expanding programs at the school, but I never hear any of the schools talking about retention practices for their faculty. So I just don't understand the culture where there's clearly a horrendous shortage of faculty, and the institutions, the academic institutions, need to, like the hospitals and every other healthcare landscape, pay for these faculty. Is this something that is just mandated through the state, or is there any type of carve out for the looming nursing shortage that we support higher faculty salaries, or is that something that regulatorily just isn't possible? I don't know, just asking.
So BRN wise, we have no input in any wages at all for any RNs. That would be seen as a direct conflict of interest for us, since we are the ones that do the licensure and set the requirements for licensure. And there would definitely be some consideration at that point if people may think that potentially the board is making those too difficult to cause a wage increase to occur, or not processing timely to cause a wage increase to incur. So the BRN is not involved in any of the pay discussions. Those are typically handled through union representation, et cetera. There are a lot of faculty workforce organizations out there. I do meet with them and give them data and participate in various ideas. There are some misses, unfortunately. BRN doesn't have a degree requirement, but accreditors do. And it is important that institutions seek accreditation a lot of times. It's not a BRN requirement, it's not a California requirement, but the institution does choose to be accredited. And that accreditation then limits who can be faculty by degree and experience. Again, where the BRN doesn't have that limitation at all. The other issue that comes into play there is the union kind of representation and stuff with that. So I did, in one of the meetings that I attended at the national level, have a discussion with the Washington Board of Registered Nursing, and they shared that there was legislation that was introduced and passed in 2019 that the legislators required all faculty wages, baseline faculty wages, to be increased to that something similar to a bedside RN. And they earmarked money specifically for that with no sunset date. They stated that, Washington State stated that with that legislative support, where faculty wages were increased and mandated to be increased and maintained, really made a difference. A lot of times we see that with our community colleges, our CSUs, or our state agencies, that they operate on grants, and that grant funding is typically used to add a faculty position, not increase wages of faculty. So with legislation that can absolutely be addressed, again, it would be outside of the BRN's jurisdiction or purview, because we could not have that conflict. But we did see that happen in Washington State in 2019, and Washington State has been able to show that it has worked very well for them.
Thank you, Lori. And thank you, Jenny. That was a very helpful comment and observation. Carmen, I see that you're off mute, but before I get to that, can I just go back to the public really quickly? I see a comment from Donna. Donna, unfortunately, in my reading of your question, it seems like it's outside of the scope of this agenda item. So Reza, if you can look at that to see whether it can be answered or not, that would be very helpful. And just to kind of follow up, Jen Ellis wrote, Loretta Bedside within 5 years will eliminate a large portion of educators who may have been educating in a healthcare facility for years and would like to move to academia. So there's that. And then just so for, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I don't see the comments on my end.
Oh, so
There's a
the
comment. there's a comment on there about NCLEX, and it pertains to license by endorsement. That's not part of the topic here, I believe, but Reza, if you think that would tie into workforce, it may, and I can go ahead and answer that. It just says, if the NCLEX is national, why doesn't it transfer easily to California without such a delay?
And we're talking about of the workforce.
I think it's fine. I mean, just answering it is not going to cause any.
Yeah. So with that, NCLEX is a part of the requirements for RN licensure. As part of the requirements for RN licensure, initially the education and background issues have to be addressed. And there are many states that have different background requirements than us. There's a state that I'm aware of that all you have to do is attest that you have no background issue, and they do not do fingerprints to verify that. We are not one of those states. There are other states that for background, they ask the applicant to provide them where they lived. And so they can say, well, I lived in Washington and California. And so they would do DOJ background checks in Washington, California. But reality, they lived in New Mexico and Texas, and they just didn't tell anybody. So with that, they wouldn't have pulled a DOJ background, and they would not know if there was any issues in those two states. Our state requires both a Department of Justice background, which is state-based, as well as an FBI background, which is nationwide. So that is something that must be completed prior to licensure, in addition to verifying licensure by NCLEX. Out of state, the Department of Justice requires that the background check be done through a LiveScan provider located in California. LiveScan gives us the results within a couple weeks. It's very fast, but the Department of Justice also requires that you cannot use a LiveScan provider outside of California. And when you're looking at endorsing licensure into California, that usually means you live outside of California. So then that process is done through what's called a hard card process. It's a paper process. You take it to the police station, they roll your fingerprints, you mail it in, et cetera. And that takes up to about 3 months for that to happen. So again, it's not just based on NCLEX passing. Additionally, each state has different requirements for education. During COVID, there was a state that chose to allow for RN licensure on a waiver without passing the NCLEX. That is not something that our state would do. And so there are RNs out there practicing without ever passing the NCLEX due to the COVID waiver. And that's something that our board does not support. Other states do not require clinical practice with theory. And we actually have a court decision on our website, specifically speaking of a school that does not have clinical practice with their theory. They just learn from a book in a lecture and don't touch patients. And so because education requirements are different state to state, our board has established that you must meet the same education requirements that our in-state graduates meet. And therefore, we do evaluate transcript to make sure that you meet those, as well as background check, as well as ensuring that you pass the NCLEX in order to become an RN in our state.
Thank you, Lori. I'm going to go back for a moment to Carmen, because you had come off mute, and then we can go back to the public. So Carmen, it's all you.
Yeah, I think just going back to our previous discussion, I think, kind of recognizing the issues of, why are nurses who want to be faculty, like what are the barriers to becoming faculty, and the same issue with, why potentially being an educator is not a desirable position for nurses. And then on the workforce side, why are nurses leaving the bedside? What are the barriers to entry into the profession? I think these are, kind of in the discussion in the past couple hours, I think, there are limits to what the BRN can do, but I think what the BRN can do at the outset is trying to, with our with our workforce surveys. I know that Joanne is in here, or maybe she joined us. You know, maybe what we can really do as NEWAC is trying to figure out the why in the situation. Even if the BRN itself can't necessarily, you know, doesn't have the authority or jurisdiction to change things like wages, you know, of faculty, but being able to identify the problems is something that the BRN may and, you know, us as NEWAC, with the support of our workforce surveys and whatnot can actually do to identify these issues. You know, I think before we were talking about the credentialing issues that may be, you know, used by educational institutions. Like we have similar problems with on the workforce side and for bedside nurses, where some employers require BSNs, where, you know, we have nurses with ADNs who can't, you know, who are having troubles to enter into the profession or getting jobs. So I think being able to identify those types of things, you know, I'm trying to find concrete things that the BRN and NEWAC can do. And maybe our role here is really trying to identify the issues and then being able to figure out what types of solutions there might be, whether it's legislation that needs to be done by a different, you know, supported by a different agency, or if there are funding issues. I think that might be where we can really add value to this conversation, because, you know, recognizing that the BRN, you know, has can't do everything, and but trying to figure out this really hard problem of like where are the barriers, and like why are people leaving both clinical education positions and on the workforce side. I think might be where we want to head.
Thanks, Carmen. I very much appreciate your reflections, because they are, in my opinion, very on point. I will say, again, being at Health Impact, we are dealing with this every day. I mean, this is what we deal with. And so we can partner with the BRN, but there are lots of different forums where this is kind of continuing to come up. And we also have to recognize what is within the purview of the BRN. And I think that this also helps me understand that, you know, we need to figure out different ways of getting the message out of the things that we're looking at, kind of writ large. So, and then what are the things that the BRN can do? Like you mentioned Joanne's survey, right? Those are some of the things that we can think about. And, you know, what are some of the questions that we need to ask so we can get more data so that it's something that's actionable? Because not only does the BRN use the data from Joanne's surveys, but other policymakers use her surveys and the BRN surveys to help make policy decisions. One thing that I will go back to in just in some of the written comments, this is, let me start from the bottom first, because I think it will make more sense. Bridget Parsh writes, agreed with Jen Ellis. So Jen Ellis talked about, you know, looking, you know, being concerned and raising the awareness around what does direct patient care mean in terms of qualifications of faculty. For example, faculty who have been teaching in their specialty for 5 years in the classroom without being in clinical care are not qualified to teach is a question. And so, so as I'm seeing these comments from Jen Ellis, from Marie Seacrest, from Bridget Parsh, sorry, Bridget, for mispronouncing your name. You know, I think that the subcommittee needs to look at Title 16 CCR of the California Code of Regulations, Section 1425. Maybe there needs to be some regulatory change. Maybe we need to be more clear about the definition of direct patient care. I am in direct patient care still. I work as a nurse practitioner, but I'm concerned that I would not even qualify to be an educator. And honestly, I have a lot more education on nursing education than most people.
The good thing is,
So-
Garrett, I can provide a lot of education through this form as well. You would qualify. You are not disqualified by working as a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife or any of the advanced practice RNs that are doing direct patient care. So you would absolutely be qualified. Additionally, to address and provide some additional education on the faculty who've been teaching in their specialty for 5 years. They're absolutely qualified to continue to teach because the director of nursing understands that their faculty that are in theory need to have 1 academic year, so 2 semesters within 5 years that they do clinical teaching as well. So as long as that director of nursing rotates them out for 1 academic year, which is 2 semesters within 5 years, to be in a clinical setting with the students, they maintain their recency and they continue to be approved. So those are not disqualifiers. Those are not things that do not allow you to be approved. So I love that this conversation is here, and I can see that there's a lot of potentially misinformation or miscommunications that are out there. And this is a good opportunity to clear that up. So with the way that 1425 is written, it is broad enough for us to have these options to allow for various ways to meet the direct patient care experience. Additionally, 1425.1 has a form that is incorporated by reference in EDP R08, and it talks about faculty remediation as well, so that they can get approved through this remediation process. And that is out there too. So just want to make sure that we pull some kind of big key items out here to make sure that we provide some clarification. The next question on there had a question on out of internationally prepared RNs. And it says, I've not been able to get approved for an experienced teacher from Thailand because she doesn't have U.S. acute care experience, despite the fact that she has a California license. That does not sound accurate to me. So I would absolutely encourage you to resubmit that application and ask for a second review. The direct patient care experience has nothing to do with whether or not it occurred in the United States or outside of the United States. We just have to show that you have equivalency. So please go ahead and submit that, resubmit that, and we would do the second review. Again, we've been working very diligently within the nursing education consultants and their supervising nursing education consultants to really look at this faculty approval process, streamline it, come into agreement with various things, and do the second review. So we hope to get this cleared up. And again, we hope to get this taken out of academia and do a direct licensing requirement so that a lot of these issues can be managed and it's not being filtered through potential misinformation on the way to the BRN.
Yeah, and I think that, thank you, Lori, that's very helpful. The concept of requesting a second review, which goes to Gretchen Nelson's comment, is an NP who works in an office and applies to teach in an ADN eligible based on, quote, direct patient care. I've been told no, and applicants have not been hired as a result. So
yeah, so we'll need to address that as well, because if they are working in an office taking care of a patient, that's direct patient care. So absolutely, again, resubmit. This is a process, again, that was refined about 6 to 8 months ago. And we've done a lot of training on that and a lot of outreach on that. So hopefully on reapplication, you would be able to get that. But I want to make sure that you guys understand that if you've applied to the school may have filtered you differently than if you applied directly to the BRN. And so the school may not understand the complete process at the BRN. We are working very hard to provide updates and outreach and re-education and et cetera on some misinformation that's out there. And so just please reach out directly. We do have on our website school questions and scope of practice that go directly to a nursing education consultant. they would be very happy to be able to address any of those concerns. And if there are specific schools that you're running into issue with, each school has an assigned nursing education consultant with them as well. We would then work through that nursing education consultant with the school to ensure that any of that stuff is cleared up. But the pathway into faculty is truly supported by the BRN through various routes. We work very hard with trying to find any way to document that you do have some direct patient care experience within the previous 5 years, as not only is that an approving requirement, it is an accreditation requirement. And so the accreditors require that, and we do as well. So there has to be a way that we can meet that. So thank you for your time on this, and let me know if there's anything else that you guys need from me on this. You can always reach out directly to me, and we can work with that as well.
Great. Thank you, Lori. I just see one last comment from Marla. So yes, please ask for the second review and let Lori know if you run into any issues. So I want to be sensitive to the time. It's 11:07, and I think we should take a short break just so that we can attend to our bio needs. I guess I would ask for last comments before we close, and then to take a short break of maybe 10 minutes before we move on to the next agenda topic. So any last comments, questions? I find that this has been very helpful. I'm so enjoying the engagement with the public and the other committee members and speaking freely about this topic.
Do you see the Samantha Gerard comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not see Samantha Gerard's comment. Sorry. Samantha Gerard, clarification on remediation. I have an RN who meets all the requirements to be hired as an educator at my institution, has experience but not the quote unquote right mix for the BRN to approve her. So would that be a second review, Lori?
Yeah, we were.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Samantha closely. So Samantha, just reach out to me, send me your request, and I will follow up on that and see if there's anything that we can do. Thank you, Samantha, sorry.
Awesome. And let me just triple check. Fantastic. I have like 3 pages of notes of things that we can follow up on. I'm really excited about this interested parties mechanism. I want to thank Lori and Reza, Macaulay, and Yvonne at the BRN for all of your support. Let's take a 10-minute break and then come back, and we'll move to the next agenda item if that's the correct thing to do, Reza. Is it okay to close now?
Did you see Janelle's comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Real quick before taking the comment, I'll just say, after all the comments are through, I think that's appropriate. We're not taking action on anything. And as you said, you're taking notes, and other committee members can do so as well for, ideas for future agenda items or priorities and things to take on.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, for some reason, Mark, can you read it for me?
I can do that, Garrett. It just is a common saying that it eliminates a large portion of staff who want to go into academia. I'm sure there are instructors teaching now who have not had their hands on patients in over 5 years. I would like to say that that does not happen. We do a continuing approval visit. The directors of nursing do submit to us these documents called EDPP-10s, where they show that each one of their academic instructors meet the recency requirements. They additionally turn that same information in to their accrediting agencies that they're associated with, as all 3 of the nursing accreditation agencies do have the same requirement as the BRN, that they do have recency. So again, we do allow for many ways to get that direct patient care experience in there. Volunteer work as documented counts. Coming into patient care, if you're serving in a hospital and you fill in and do breaks or relief or charge or anything like that, definitely comes in there. Working in a clinic as a provider is direct patient care. And so there are many, many ways to meet that. Again, just remember that we did refine this process, reevaluate this process, and put secondary reviews just a short time ago. So if there were denials in the past, please, please, please resubmit, and our supervising NECs and the NEC group will review those to see if there's any possible way that we can get them approved. We do have to be in alignment with our creditors, and we are willing absolutely to work with the programs and the RNs to see if we can get them approved. And a lot of times it's just, updating your resume to say the right words instead of just putting down that I'm an educator. I was a clinical educator in a hospital for a while, and I dropped into staffing several times to assist when the acuity was high. So I just had to make sure that I put that on my resume because that wasn't there. I was looking for other education positions and didn't realize that was imperative. So when I asked for that to be updated, that then proves that they have the direct patient care experience, and we're able to approve them. So just understand that we're just working to clear up the miscommunication, the misinformation, and please resubmit if you've been turned down before.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Let me just triple check that no committee members off mute. No, I don't see anybody. So it's 11:12 now. Let's come back at 11:25, and we'll continue with the next agenda item. Thank you so much to the public and the committee members. Okay. See you then. Great. I'm sorry. Should we do another roll call?
Yes, we do need to establish a quorum.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome back, everyone. I'm pleased to report that I got 100 steps in. I'm not nearly close to what I should be doing per day, so I'm happy to get 100. So
good for you, Garrett.
I have 1,000.
Oh God, well, that's much better than my 100 steps. So welcome back, everyone. So doing a roll call, I have Garrett Chan present, Janine Graves.
Present.
Thank you. Barbara Barney Knox. BBK, are you still with us? Let's see her. I do not see her. Okay. Carmen Consti.
I'm here.
Great, thanks, Carmen. Karen Rizal.
I'm here.
Thank you, Karen. Hazel Torres.
I am back.
That's great. I see a new scarf. I like that.
It's cold.
Very fashionable. Jacqueline Bowman. Okay, not here. Joanne Spetz? No, not here. Kathy Hughes? No. Kim Doe?
Hi, Garrett. I'm here. And I saw Joanne in the attendee list earlier during the break.
Oh, okay. Mark, if you can help elevate her if she's still there, that would be great. Thanks, Kim. Linda Pham? No, I don't see Linda. Sajid Guzman? No. Sandra Miller is not here today. Tammy Ventel?
I believe she mentioned earlier she had to drop off about 10:30.
Oh, thank you. That's right. Thanks, Lori. Tanya Altman?
Present.
Thanks, Tanya. And Wendy Hensborough?
I'm back.
Great. Thanks, Wendy. And Joanne Spetz?
Oh, I can unmute now. Yes, hi.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. Excellent, excellent. So let me just count because I wasn't counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9. Is that your correct count? So we have a quorum. Excellent. Well, welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Joanne, to the next agenda item, which is 6.0, which is discussion regarding bridging the quote academic practice gap in registered nursing. And so, in looking at the meeting materials, you will see in this particular agenda item, we're going to be talking about possible ways to possibly bridge the quote-unquote academic practice gap. And to get us started, I'd like to just do a general overview and generic definition, because actually there is no formal definition in the literature, even though I've written actually quite extensively on this and I've done research in this area. I know that there's no formal definition of what the academic practice gap is, but what it is in essence, or the phenomenon that we do see, is that what is being provided in academic institutions is not necessarily the complete set of competencies, skills, behaviors that practice needs. And I did a pilot study, I think it was published in 2021, where I used an online simulation program to evaluate this academic practice gap and actually be one of the first studies to quantify the gap. And the way that we measured this quote unquote gap was we looked at using it's a close to true life simulation program. We looked at the number of medication errors, the pass rates in any of the top 15 hospital admission diagnoses. We looked at failure to rescue rates. We looked at sentinel error events. And what we found was in 29, so it was a pilot study, 29 new grads, they committed 766 medication errors. 73% of them committed a sentinel error event. 100% failed to appropriately care for patients with diabetes and stroke using those two simulations. And so, there's also literature from chief nurses who are very concerned about the practice readiness. Again, a concept that's not defined. There's no definition of what practice readiness means in the literature, and looking at what practice readiness is, but chief nurses are also reporting that new grads are not practice ready. And so there seems to be a disconnect from the practice side, from the academic side, and attending, I will tell you, over the course of the past 4 years being the CEO and president of Health Impact, I've probably attended 12 different conferences on the practice side and on the academic side. The discussions, the end points for success are different, or the metrics for practice readiness, whatever that is talked about in different ways when I attend educational conferences versus when I attend conferences where we have chief nurses or directors of education, transition to practice program conferences. I just see this distinct difference in this gap. And so, we are coming out of a pandemic, post-pandemic, and this might be an opportunity for us to relook at this. And what are some of the things that the BRN specifically can think through? Because we're going to be giving advice to the board, because that's our role as NEWAC, is to give advice to the board both the staff as well as the board members, about how to think through this concept of academic practice gap. And so I'm just going to leave it there because I don't want to, direct any more of the conversation, but really set the stage for why this is important and why this was brought up as a topic for a subcommittee within NEWAC. So from a process perspective, I'd like to start with the NEWAC committee members and see if you have any comments. Feel free to take yourself off mute, and then we'll go to the public and then hopefully engage in a conversation like we did in the last agenda item. So committee members, welcome your thoughts.
So as committee members,
Sorry.
Still working with audio visual issues here. I did get a note from my internet provider that says that they're working to resolve a service problem in my area. So at least I have an answer as to why we're undergoing this. But as committee members are kind of looking into this, I just wanted to make sure that everybody on the meeting was aware of the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, and that they just launched an updated NCLEX. As was kind of talked in the previous agenda item, they asked why NCLEX wasn't just kind of the only entry into licensure for all of our states. So that just kind of brought NCLEX forward. And so understand that the NCLEX as of April 1st is a brand new NCLEX. It is called the Next Generation NCLEX, and it worked to do exactly what we're discussing here. They wanted to develop a new way to test for entry level into practice, really focusing on clinical judgment measurement model. And they use that as a framework for the valid measurement of clinical judgment and decision-making within the context of a standardized high-stakes examination. And so they drew upon nursing literature, nursing pedagogy, cognitive psychology, psychological assessment, and decision science related to decision-making and nursing clinical judgment. They did multiple investigations. They involved over 100 nursing experts and analysis of data from more than 200,000 NCLEX candidates. They really looked at why the baseline into nursing needed to be addressed. And so now that that is out and released, our academic programs are teaching more in alignment with the next generation NCLEX, and we're hoping to see just big changes in nursing education and the utilization of the next gen NCLEX to really help to address some of that academic practice gap and ensure that, the entry baseline safety exam actually measures the clinical practice and their ability for clinical decision making versus just rote memorization. Do you know nursing or do you not know nursing? So hopefully that will be something that brings about some change.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that update, Lori. I see Wendy is off mute. So Wendy, please.
Yes. So I will share that we have had a collaborative effort, which I'm listening to you, Garrett, and realize I need to write this up to get it published. And I will do that in the next month or so. But we've had a collective effort with all of our universities and our community colleges in our region. We started meeting last year, early part of this year, actually. And we have identified that there's a three-pronged approach to this. And our meetings have been very enlightening in helping us, and I should say, it's not only been the universities and schools, we've brought in our regional clinical partners as well. So we are having very robust, honest conversations about what opportunities we have to provide practice-ready nurses. And realizing when we collaborate, there's information available that will help guide us that we really haven't taken advantage of. And I'll give you a quick example of that. Our clinical partners track they're new graduates, they track how long they're in orientation, they track their success at orientation or their transition into practice. And yet the schools don't get that information. So for example, if a university has students that are going to a particular area, they're hired to that healthcare organization, there's not a feedback mechanism, so the organization provides the school with knowledge if a new grad is not successful in transition. So that's just one example of the data that we are striving to share in a much more open way to help all of us. You mentioned academic expectations and practice expectations. That's another area we are working on, to have a common understanding, a common expectation of what we have. I don't mean to put this into just business terms. However, we do have, in academics, if we look at it, that we are producing a product, and we need to know whether or not the product we are producing serves the needs of the consumer, which is the healthcare organizations that will hire them. And if there's a mismatch, then that is our area in which to have conversation and come up with collective solutions about how we can improve that. I'll stop talking.
How exciting, Wendy, and I can't wait to read your publication. So that's fantastic. And it's like these opening up these dialogues and actually not working in our own silos. I think that is going to be really one of the major points that we're going to be looking at in terms of it, reducing or narrowing those gaps. Now, there's no way that the educational institution is going to be able to completely do everything that needs to be done, and I don't necessarily think that that's on the practice side's expectation, but I'm so excited to hear the work that you're doing. So keep it up and let us know. I'm really, really happy.
It's in its early stages right now. I mean, but I have been encouraged by the enthusiasm for people that want to come to the meeting, that want to solve the problems, that want to work collectively. So that's been really encouraging when I see that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Wendy. Carmen.
Thanks. I'm also excited about what Wendy was talking about, and I think from the perspective of nurses who are working, what we've been hearing, what the California Nurses Association has been hearing from new nurses is that they really want some guidance and mentorship on how to transition to practice. I think, just to highlight here before getting into the public comment, one of the things that we've seen is that when there is a gap in, in preparation of nurses who are graduating, we have employers stepping in to create slapdash. Oftentimes, other times they're good programs, but oftentimes they're just repackaged programs of normal on-the-job training as transition to practice, residency programs, things of that nature, which have no type of kind of guidance or regulation or of any sort. So these kind of new graduate training programs are anything that a healthcare facility, a healthcare system decides to put together. So like we have this kind of randomness in terms of how new graduates are getting the gap filled. But then oftentimes, we've heard of new graduates in these kind of residency programs, new graduate programs, where the nurse precepting them is the nurse that's like a year or two out, who is not actually out of the quote unquote new graduate training program yet. So we have these kind of bizarre things that employers and other institutions are doing on the back end because we don't have appropriate pre-licensure preparation of nurses. So I think, you know, I kind of just want to say this as like the issue that we're seeing here, and the implications down the line of what's happening. Because when our new nurses are put into these situations, you know, they get overwhelmed, and you know, we see really high attrition rates with new graduate nurses, particularly because a fair number of new nurses are being, you know, levied with the cost of these alleged residency programs and whatnot. So, you know, we have so much burden put on, both financial burden and you know, just work burden, because we're just throwing new nurses into dangerous situations, particularly during COVID. And you know, I think I'm sure Joanne has better statistics than I do, but you know, where there's high attrition rates in you know, between 1 and 3 years of new graduates. And I think that's the real impact of not having preparation.
So beautifully said, Carmen. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And it's, in my opinion, it's totally right on. We are hearing this from the field. And one of the things, well, I want people to speak before me. So any other advisory committee members want to speak and share? Please just feel free to come off mute. That way that I know that you want to say something. Joanne.
Yeah, I'll just note, you know, since it's been mentioned by Carmen, you know, I think in general there is a lot of data that has been going back for a long time that relatively recent graduates tend to turn over fairly early in their first job. The data fortunately show that historically the vast majority of them, like, you know, way over 90%, stay in nursing. So they leave their first job, but they are looking for something better, not that they are going to quit the profession entirely. There has been some new data that has come out that might suggest that some of these newer graduates, when they leave their first job right now during this kind of post-pandemic period, actually might really be leaving, or might be so disenchanted with that first experience that they're thinking about leaving. Hard to say. In the middle of a pandemic, everybody was feeling pretty burned out. So that may stabilize out and become less of a concern, or it may actually become something that really diminishes our workforce in the long term. We don't really know yet. We are in the middle of analyzing the 2022 survey, which I think will help give us a bit of a sense of where the path might be going. But you know, I think there's a lot of concern with retiring baby boomers about how do you get new graduates onboarded effectively, have them feel really good about and confident and supported, and retain them in those first jobs. Because I know that we always hear from employers that they worry about that turnover, meaning that they make a big investment in helping to get somebody through that transitional period, and then they just leave. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on organizations to figure that out. It also, from a broader labor standpoint, it's not necessarily that different in other professions. You know, there are any number of teachers that in their first job are totally dying. My daughter just did her first year of teaching middle school English. It was tough. She thought about whether she should look for a different school to work in at the end of the year, but her school was super supportive and she decided that she really would stay. Her boyfriend, maybe not so much. And you know, so there are other professions that first transitional period is just difficult regardless of the profession that you're in. And that there is a ramp up. You know, when I talk with journalists, I say, when you hire a new journalism grad from college, how much time does it take for them before you feel like you really truly would let them lead a story by themselves? And then they usually are like, they probably need to do 2 or 3 stories with a lot of tight mentorship and co-authorship before we'd let them even do a baby simple story on their own. And it's like, well, nursing's not that different necessarily. So it's, so I think maybe that leads some comfort that nursing is not alone in these transitional processes. And there may be more that academia can do, but it is kind of inherent that your first job is just going to be different than what your education is like.
Great, thank you, Joanne. Other advisory committee members?
So I'll jump in real quick while maybe some other advisory committee members decide to join. One of the things that I do want to point out, in addition to the Next Gen NCLEX, is part of our regulations require student participation. And so it says students shall be provided opportunity to participate with faculty in the identification of policies and procedures related to students, including but not limited to philosophy and objectives, learning experiences, and curriculum instruction and evaluation of the various aspects of the program, including clinical facilities. There is evidence out there that the clinical experiences directly affect the quality of preparation of the student. That is also, as we know, clinical is also simulation. And I know that Garrett, you've got the subcommittee that you participate in on simulation, and we'll report out on that with the next NEWAC committee, I believe. And so we'll get some more information on that. But getting that feedback is key. This also includes graduate surveys, right? And so a lot of institutions also do advisory committees themselves, where they get their clinical partners and they get the people that they are hiring to come in and give the school feedback. Those are all amazing things. What we find a lot of time kind of goes back to the last discussion is the faculty shortage. When you have a shortness where you don't have enough resources and you have a faculty shortage, you might have a plethora of information, but you have no way to implement that, to make the changes, because you are just kind of putting out fires and just going through the day-to-day, just getting by because you don't have adequate resources. So those are some of the big issues and stuff that we see when we're meeting and having these conversations, when our nursing education consultants do the continuing approval visits, where we go out and meet with the clinical providers and the people that are hiring, and we hear about that. And so those are really some key things. And then when you're looking at preparing the student for nursing, it kind of goes back to the previous discussion as well, where people were getting kind of upset about that recency direct patient care requirement. If you don't have a nurse that's been practicing recently, how are they going to teach the next generation of nursing? And so you want to always kind of balance that when you're looking at what can be addressed. And so typically lowering requirements is not the answer. Typically it says, how can we open it up and just be more inclusive and get more people to the table and have these ideas? How can we facilitate them, and how can we encourage them? And to mention health impact, when you guys developed that faculty training program, that's fantastic. I mean, those are absolutely things that need to be done, because the nurse is trained to be a nurse. The nurse is not trained to be a teacher. And all of our faculty are now nurses who are becoming teachers. And so that's a wonderful, wonderful thing that is really going to promote nursing and help with pedagogy and help get our students better prepared. And so those are some of the things where it's not lowering the bar. It's setting the bar and helping them meet the bar. And that to me has been key. We did see that through COVID, where the bar was dropped exponentially in many, many states, and across the nation, we have heard of the decline in practice readiness. Across our state, we have shown NCLEX pass rates as a whole decline, more so than what we expected throughout COVID. And so we're hoping that we start to see a swing up. However, the Next Gen just started, and typically any change to the NCLEX, we also see a decrease as well. So just kind of putting that out there for you guys as food for thought as you guys continue to have discussions about this.
Thanks so much, Lori. I really appreciate your additional contributions and, perspective. And one of the things that, so I just want to make sure I want everybody else to speak before me, before we open up to public comments. So I don't see anybody off mute. One of the things that we're working on nationally is, again, there's not great shared definitions. We don't have central understandings of some of these major constructs like practice readiness, as I mentioned. But even the concept of competency, what's a competency? We have people interpreting that very differently. And so there are two national organizations that are really launched. And I want to share them for the subcommittee members to consider as they look at, looking at the academic practice gap. And the one organization is called ICONED, ICONED, which stands for the International Consortium for Outcomes of Nursing Education. Again, International Consortium for Outcomes of Nursing Education. And the leader of that group is Dr. Marianne Jessee, Jessee, at Vanderbilt University. She was a PhD student under Dr. Christine Tanner, who was at Oregon Health Sciences University and had done a lot of work with Dr. Benner. And so ICONED, and they have a website, it's iconed.org, is really looking at educational programs don't have a shared lexicon. They don't have shared understandings of outcomes in for nursing education. And so ICONED is really working hard on trying to create this shared understanding of what are the outcomes of education. Kind of, if you will, a sister organization that came out of the American Organization of Nurse Leaders is called the National Collaborative for Transition to Practice Programs. Carmen, you hit the nail on the head here. If you see one transition to practice or residency program, you've seen one transition to practice or residency program. This group, and I'm chairing one of the subcommittees looking at the concept of practice readiness. That's why I know very clearly we don't have a single definition of what practice readiness is. We're working on what do transition practice programs need to have. It's very exciting that the collaborative, the National Collaborative, and there's not a website yet. It was just formed as an 501c3 in May of this year, so last month. That we're doing is we're coming up with the standards and guidelines for transition to practice programs. We need to have more standardization. We need to have best practices. And what's really exciting about this particular collaborative is that we have academic leaders, deans and senior executives, executive associate deans for nursing programs. We have ANCC, the PTAC, the Practice Transitions Accreditation Program. So we have accreditors, we have Vizient, the accreditation group. We have practice experts. We have residency experts, all coming together and looking at this holistically. We're being very diverse. We want to include everybody who's been in the space to make sure that we are creating the best residency standards so that it's not just something that's slapped together, as you mentioned, Carmen, that it actually is grounded in evidence and meets really high standards. Because whether, to Lori's point about simulation or even direct clinical experiences, is that whatever it is for nursing students or even for new grads in a residency program, it has to be high quality, first and foremost, high quality. And, you know, there were some programs, you know, as we talked about in the pandemic, you know, where, you know, they were struggling, nursing schools are struggling to get direct clinical hours, and they did 16 hours of vaccine clinic. You know, yes, they were engaged and they were totally taking care of patients and or people who needed a vaccine. I wouldn't necessarily call them patients, but people who wanted the vaccine. And then so they got the hours in, but was it really the high quality that we would hope? And, you know, people were putting things together in COVID because it was a really rough time. So, you know, I'm not denigrating any of that, because faculty worked very, very hard, and kudos to faculty, really. And at the same time, we also know when I was overseeing in one clinical setting where there was an observation-only policy for students, I'm like, no, we're not going to have observation only. They had, for the electronic health record, they had view-only access. I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense. So we also know that clinical agencies can all, you know, have to work with their risk departments and compliance departments, et cetera, to figure out how to work through some of these issues for students. But we do students disservice on the clinical side if we have observation-only policies, and so there's always this balance, right? And there's no one right answer. And so as we continue to standardize and create more structure and give resources, because if you may have gotten promoted to a residency director position and never have any past education on education, that also creates issues. And it's like, oh, you know, we tend to do this in, well, not just nursing, in many different disciplines, but if you're good in one thing, then you must be good in another thing, right? Oh, you're an excellent staff nurse, so you must be an excellent educator, which may or may not be true. Or you're an excellent researcher, so you must be an excellent dean, that which may or may not be true. And so how do we help support people with the right tools to help their populations be as successful as possible? Any other comments from the advisory committee before we open it up to public comment?
Hey, Garrett. Thank you. I just want to give a little perspective from, you know, working in a nurse residency program. Sutter Health has, as you know, a very robust nurse residency program with a 97% retention rate for new nurses after their first 2 years of practice. And while I applaud, you know, having some kind of baseline curriculum or foundation for nurse residency, I think the power of this residency program is that the supervisors or preceptors on the floor give active feedback at all times to the educational faculty at the nurse residency program, because not all nursing schools are equal and not all clinical opportunities are available. So we're really doing targeted focused support, educational support, either in the sim lab or with didactic. You know, for a long time, we had to actually introduce neurochecks. You know, how do you chart that in Epic? It's not easy. And a lot of students are on Cerner. They learned on Cerner. They learned on various platforms. So I just want to give a nod to Sutter's partnership with their clinical leads in terms of supporting those nurses. And I'd like to get away from a one-size-fits-all nurse residency program, because you need to have that flex and be nimble enough to address what the nurses are really needing to know, where their academic practice gaps are, where their clinical practice gaps are, and address them in a safe environment. And I think that's a key to the success of the program at Sutter Health anyway.
Yeah, that's a great point, Janine. And when I talk about, you know, standards, I mean, they're not going to be too prescriptive, but I would say that a standard should be that there's active communication about specific core dimensions between the residency program and the preceptor or mentor or the manager of that particular resident. we see that sometimes these programs don't have, they onboard them and then let them go. And there's no communication. And then all of a sudden you hear this person has been fired. And it's like, well, what happened? Why did you not communicate with us so that we can help? Well, we thought we could take care of it on our own. So when we look at standards, it's not necessarily curricular standards. It's more structure standards, like you should be communicating at specific touch points. So I want to be very clear when we talk about that.
Yeah, just that's a great way to re-articulate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Mark, let's go ahead and open it up to the public.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." And do you see that comment from Sue Engel?
Sorry, let me scroll
Yes.
down here.
The comment from Sue Engel was on the prior agenda item, and if you're able to see it, is absolutely correct. And it just kind of goes to show just some more conversation on what is needed to get faculty approved. And the statement that she made just says, when the program submits the faculty approval form with the CV or resume, the information clearly needs to show that the nurse has the requisite knowledge, training, and experience to meet the regulations. Many times the information is not upfront and clear. And so, again, that just went more towards the faculty approval process last time to kind of address workforce and such. So she's accurate. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Corliss would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, this is Judy Corliss, former board member of the BRN. And I'd like to thank you, Janine, for your comment about the residency programs. And what I'd like to know is, do we have any data that shows the new residency programs that are specifically for each specialty? The ones I've seen and worked with at CHOC, particularly, of course, that's pediatrics, and I've seen several in the OB arena. So do we have any statistics about those particular specialty ones? Because I think they're very effective. I've worked with some students in the last couple of years in their graduate programs, and they've done very well by attending, the residency program in a specific area, rather than just throw them in and say, okay, we're going to do med surg and peds and OB all together, because that's, they don't get enough information to work any of those specialty areas when they just do a generic one. So do we have any data on that? I don't know if anybody can answer that, but that would be my input, because I think that's the direction that works the best in what I've seen in outcomes. So thank you so much, and this is a great committee.
Great. Thanks, Judy. What I can tell you is that, well, there's no single repository of any data at all. One of the things that the collaborative, the National Collaborative for Transition and Practice Programs has done, because we have Vizient, we have Vizient, Versant, and we have ANCC PTAP, a representative, is that they report out on a program as opposed to specific specialties. And so that's a bit of a challenge. However, one of the core tenets that the 3 do recognize is that, and I also would endorse this thought, is that, you know, nursing education is, nurses aren't educated as generalists, right? You get med-surg, PhD, psych. But when you graduate, you immediately go into a specialty. Med-surg is a specialty.
Right.
You know, L&D is a specialty. Public health is a specialty. And so that transition to practice. So as Vizient and ANCC, PTAP, and Versant are starting to think about is, you know, that it has to be specialty specific. And so we don't have any national data on it. We don't have anything in California, but it is something as we're kind of rethinking about this, we're really thinking about the concept of specialty. So your comment is really on point. And unfortunately, I personally don't have any data around that, and maybe other people might, but I've been pretty steeped in this for quite some time now.
No, I know you have. Thank you so much for all you do, Garrett, and we'll keep going at it and try to get some data. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's get together.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. Sorry. Mark, you're the moderator. You moderate.
Yeah, I got you. No worries. I was just waiting for you to finish. Thank you for your comment, Judy. Bryn O'Neill would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I definitely agree with what people have been saying, that NUAC can help the BRN do more to support new nurses in their transition to practice. So first of all, right now, nurses are being asked to begin their careers with fewer pre-licensure direct care clinical hours under their belts due to the shift to simulation in nursing schools. Simulation is not an effective substitute for direct care clinical hours in preparing nurses to work with patients. So NUAC should explore ways that the BRN can support community college programs in meeting the new Nurse Practice Act requirement of 500 direct care clinical hours for nursing programs. And I think there'll be time in the next section to talk more about specifics there, but I really do want to emphasize that that connects to preparation for practice. And then secondly, NUAC can help the BRN to explore ways to support state-funded training or mentorship programs for new nurses. As Carmen explained, leaving the training of new nurses up to employers has led to highly variable experiences. And some employers have used their training programs as an excuse to lock new nurses into repayment agreements, traps under which employers can trap nurses in poor working conditions, threaten them with debt if they leave, and then nurses end up feeling intimidated and unable to speak up instead of feeling supported as they start their practice, which pushes some nurses out of the profession. So instead of just leaving training up to employers, NUAC should recommend that the BRN find ways to support state-funded training and mentorship programs and advocate for those to be created, whether in pre-licensure or post-licensure programs to help new nurses transition to practice. Way back in around 2005, not sure of precise years, there was a 3-year pilot program called the California Nurse Mentor Project, and that had a really significant positive impact on the retention of new nurses, but it never got implemented statewide. And CNA is really eager to work with NUAC and work with the BRN to design and advocate for a similar mentorship program now. Thank you.
That's
Again,
really, I'm sorry, go
real
ahead.
quick to address this last comment. I just want to make sure that people on the call again understand where BRN's jurisdiction is. We have no jurisdiction over post-licensure nursing education programs. So I know that you had mentioned that maybe work with some kind of RN to BSN, like post-licensure stuff. We don't have any jurisdiction over that. What would have to occur is there would have to be a legislative ask. It would have to go through the legislative session and be voted in, and then signed into law for the BRN to expand their oversight to post-licensure.
I don't know that that would be received well by all. So I just wanted to make sure that we do not have the jurisdiction over that as well. And then for new grad programs, that again does not fall underneath the BRN's jurisdiction. That is typically addressed within hospital and health and safety code. There was a recent bill that went through, I believe, a year ago on implicit bias. I believe it was AB 1407. And you can see where our business professions code was addressed, where it said that part of nursing education, that we had to ensure that there's implicit bias training as part of the graduate requirements. But then there was a separate section down at the bottom of that bill that addressed the health and safety code, where it addressed a hospital as defined in subdivision A of section 1250. They shall implement an evidence-based implicit bias program as described in subdivision B of section blah, 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 where it says as part of its new graduate training program that hires and trains new nursing and program graduates. So I love that everybody wants the BRN to be involved. And I would love to have the BRN's hands in all of these areas, but we do not have the jurisdiction over hospitals and hospital-led new grad programs. We do not have the jurisdiction under the Health and Safety Code. We are limited to our Nurse Practice Act. And within our Nurse Practice Act, we also do not have jurisdiction over post-licensure programs. We do pre-licensure and we do advanced practice. So just clarification, again, I'd love to help, but and these discussions are wonderful, even if I'm having to redirect to where this can go. So all of that is education, and all of that will lead you guys to where these wonderful comments and helpful information land, and that could be within discussion of with California Department of Public Health or any other institution that would oversee these.
Thank you, Loretta. And Brandon, I want to thank you, Brandon, for bringing up the California Nurse Mentor Project. That has been, unfortunately, a while ago, but something, that from a policy perspective, we definitely should think through. And I value CNA's perspective and your recommendations moving forward. So all the things that you're mentioning, we will continue to investigate and look at. And again, I very much appreciate you sharing CNA's perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do you want me to go to the people that want to make a comment, or do we want to address the people that are just typing in comments?
Let me go I guess let me start with the written comments, only because it seems to be in order. And they quote unquote spoke up first. Is that okay, Mark?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, great. So there's a comment in the written comments from Samantha Gerard. I have to say that I now understand why I may be fourth program director since 2017 at my college. The role is becoming so cumbersome with the slow and clunky college process, the clinical barriers to placement, preceptors that are voluntold to precept the regulations. It's too much. Data. There's data, and the ability to use it to affect change feels a bit out of reach. I've mentioned this, and so has E.O. Melby, and that we describe her everyday work life. So she knows that we understand the challenges that you all face, and the answer is absolutely. And Samantha, thank you so much for your hard work and all that you've done. And these are not easy jobs, and what we can do at the BRN and make recommendations to the board to help make things easier, so that we can help retain what we call academic leaders, deans and directors. That's what we want to do. As an aside, I had a DNP student, Dr. Lynette Appen, A-P-E-N, We did as part of our DNP program, we did a survey, a secondary analysis of the survey data set, looking specifically at the challenges for academic leaders. And so it's published. You can look at, if you type in APEN, A-P-E-N, and Chan, you can probably find it pretty easily. So we know, we hear you. We will figure out how to help in any way we can. And whatever the BRN can do, you know, I have all of these pieces of information, and I try to figure out what can the BRN do, what's in the jurisdiction of the BRN, and thank you, Lori, for reminding us about what is in the purview of the BRN. But anything that we can do within the BRN, the NEWAC is committed to addressing those issues. And Ms. Jorad also continues as program director, the perceptions around practice readiness are hard to nail down. Depending on the practice partners or the managers of the bedside nurses, it differs. We do not have the luxury of declining a magnet facility that severely restricts what students can do in this setting, specifically specialty settings that are not easily replaced. One of our facilities does not allow the students to chart. One way to address this gap is either to create your own charting system or pay, let's see, that probably continues, pay for a documentation companion that, of course, has a purchase price and annual subscription, as well as iPads or Chromebooks that students take into clinical. Concept-based curriculum, while we are integrating NCSBN CJM into our curriculum, we're still chasing, quote, practice readiness and what that means. And Samantha, we're working on it. As an aside, and again, this is outside of the purview of the BRN, but the collaborative for transition to practice programs and ICON Ed is convening in July, I think it's July 27th, an international renowned panel of experts. So we can start. It's the kickoff meeting, so we won't have the answer by July 27th, but it is the kickoff meeting because we need to define what practice readiness is, what are the dimensions, and it will be a first draft. It's not going to be perfect. Hopefully we'll have the final product by the fall, but it's going to be a first draft. It will not be perfect. We want to get it out into the public. We want to get comments back so that people can understand what practice readiness means. And so we have educators as well as practice experts in the room to talk about this. So very much appreciate your comments, and it's really on track. And I'm sorry, you continue on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Real quick, Garrett, I just want to do a time check. We are 40 minutes from the end of our committee meeting, and we have not got to the next agenda item, the last one. But I also wanted to kind of redirect. I know a lot of people are used to coming on to Zoom meetings and web meetings and using the chat as a way to have a conversation. That's not typically the way that the BRN WebEx is set up. So please, within the guidelines of our WebEx, if you can, please put in the comments, I would like to make a comment, and then we will unmute you and have you all speak and give you the time to do that. The reading of the comments typically are reserved for those that do not have an ability to make a verbal comment. So just want to kind of redirect just a little bit, put us back to attention to time, and then Garrett, you can continue.
Thanks. Thank you, Laurie, for being definitely the co-pilot on this. So let me go to the next comment, which is, I think, Christina Kelly, who would like to make a public comment. Is that right, Mark?
No, we're missing Gretchen Nelson. Do you want me to give Gretchen Nelson the opportunity to speak, or do you want to just read her comment?
Oh, sorry. Let me just read her comment because she spent time putting it in. As a clinical educator for over 20 years, I was experiencing more desperation from industry for new grads, but less engagement and help when I have students in the clinical setting. Staff are extremely hesitant to reach out in hospital clinical sites on more restrictions as to what students can do and even what instructors can participate in. New hires always get preference for clinical experiences. which I understand, but the clinical experience is becoming a minimalistic experience. It's exhausting too. So thank you so much, Gretchen, for that. And I appreciate the comments and things that we will continue to have the subcommittee think through. Christina Kelly is the next person, I think, Mark?
Yes. Christina, I've sent the unmute. If you're on a cell phone, I think is it pound 6? Ooh, I forget now. Star 6.
While Christina's trying to unmute, we'll probably go till 12:30.
Yeah, she's typed back in the comments that she's not able to see the unmute. So I don't know if board moderator, you can do that. And of course, while board moderator is working with Christina, we can go ahead and I'll read the next comment from Marcelo. And it said, what the BRN can do to narrow the gap between nursing education and clinical competencies needed in the actual clinical setting. Thank you. We at the BRN oversee nursing education. And so really the focus comes in as how do we ensure that the education preparation is, as Garrett put it, and I put it before, quality. It's not just about having a simulation experience. It's not just about having clinicals to check a box. It is about having clinicals and simulation that can help address the clinical objectives, and that those objectives are appropriately weighted, and that they get the feedback and they really make the education where it needs to be. So we are pretty limited, Marcelo, but I think we can have a huge impact when looking at education. Is Christina able to come off mute yet? And if not, we can move to the next typed comment.
Christina, you're on your cell phone. Can you try star 6?
Okay, while she continues to try.
She's on a computer. It says
okay.
A computer. Do you have a microphone? Yes, I don't know why it's not letting you. Usually a window will pop up that says unmute.
Okay, we'll continue to work with Christina. So the next comment while we work with her was from Roseanne Kayan Yip. It says, I'm appealing to receive back my family nurse practitioner in BRN. I'm not sure why the dignity. Roseanne, please go ahead and reach out to the board's executive staff, and we will work with you on that. That is separate from this committee and not part of this agenda item, but I did want to give you some guidance to do that. You can also reach out directly to me at loretta.melby@dca.ca.gov. It looks like the remaining commenter for this agenda item is Christina Kelly. And thank you, Roseanne. Hopefully you were able to do that. If you're not able to see the email, you can find it on our website as well.
Yes, Christina Kelly has unmuted.
I'm unmuted now. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
My apologies for that. My name is Christina Kelly. I am the Director of Education, Professional Practice, and Research at Sharp Chula Vista Medical Center. I'm also heavily involved in academia. And aside from that, I am on the board, the new board of ANAC as the Education Director. One thing that hasn't been mentioned that I would like to know if it's being tossed around to be taken into consideration is the robustness of the work that a nurse has to do compared to 10 years ago, compared to 20 years ago, compared to 30 years ago. Are we taking into consideration the overall health of our community? things like social injustice, things like increased homelessness, increased lack of resources to the general population. I always feel like nurses are trying to shove 24 hours worth of work into a 12-hour shift. And before anyone starts to think that, well, nursing's 24 hours a day, you should just hand off. When you're attempting to onboard a new nurse and they're focused solely on getting to know their patient, taking care of that patient's minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour needs during that shift, there's things like checklists and core measures and bundles, and we need to keep this NSI particular percentage low, and we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and everything seems to fall on nursing. And speaking from an academic, my academic hat, I find that we're not enriching our programs enough with those particular scenarios. Many of the scenarios in the clinical education that our nurses get rest solely on disease management, right? We're not looking at the greater bundle of things that nurses are required to be responsible for in the 12 hours. And I think that that's very overwhelming for a new to practice nurse, something that I can say personally, when I entered the workforce 17 years ago, that I did not have to contend with, that nurses have to contend with now. So with a change in population, resource availability, and what is expected of a nurse, I find that nurses are being set up for failure. And so I'd like to know if that is being considered at all when we're moving forward to figure out how we can best onboard and meet the needs of our new and upcoming workforce. Thank you.
And so just to quickly respond to you, Christina, that is always something that we have in the back of our mind. The board sets in 1426 the minimum curriculum requirements with some basic guidelines. Each one of our academic institutions create their own curriculum that is unique to each one of the academic institutions. And they go through their own approval process to get that done. They create their graduate outcomes, they create their mission and vision, they create their objectives. And so every single institution has the ability to do different nursing preparation as long as it encompasses the basic requirements for licensure for 1426. The other thing that I don't know that a lot of people are aware of is that the BRN has no degree requirement for licensure. And in fact, they are silent in any statutory or regulatory context on degrees. And so you can enter the workforce with an ADN, a BSN, an ELM, and you could also enter the workforce with a certificate. The example is our LVN to RN 30-unit option. So BRN sets minimum licensing requirements. We do set a basic requirement for what is allowed for in curriculum, but it is truly up to the academic institution to develop a curriculum that meets the needs of that community in preparing their nurses to be able to be practice ready. Again, I know a term that is not easily defined. The other thing that there are a lot of academic institutions that are not aware of is a service that is provided by NCSBN that is called Mountain Measures. And so each one of their nursing students, when they register for take the NCLEX examination, register with a school code. That school code is unique to the academic institution, and every person that takes the NCLEX gets aggregated feedback as to what areas those students did well in and what areas those students did not do well in. It does break it down to content areas. It does break it down to the school and the cohort, et cetera. And those mountain measures, when they've now adjusted the NCLEX to address that clinical judgment aspects, are going to be key. They should be looking at those mountain measures. They should be bringing them back to faculty, and they should be addressing any of the deficiencies that are identified by the student who takes the NCLEX in the areas that they have problems in. So with the academic freedom that each one of our nursing faculty have, all of that stuff that you suggested to be addressed can absolutely be addressed within the current regulatory and statutory compliance that the board has out. So please
in any of the academic institutions that are listening here, any of the faculty that are there, understand that you guys have the ability to make your curriculum as robust and focused as possible within your academic institution, and that if you have questions, please reach out to the NEC that's assigned to your unit. Your college or university, and we will work with trying to get that message passed.
Thanks, Lori. For some reason, I closed my chat, so I actually can't see who else is in there. Do we have?
It is clear.
Okay.
It is clear. You can go on to the next one.
All right. So thank you, everybody. This has been great for this agenda item 6.0. In the interest of time, so we can spend the last 27 minutes on agenda item 7.0, I'm going to move us forward to discuss clinical placements, infection, and clinical displacement, a very hot topic, and I apologize for only 27 minutes, but it's something that's well known. I'm going to see if anybody on the advisory committee would like to discuss this issue. Please come off mute.
Well, okay, I'll jump in, Garrett. That seems to be what I do as everybody kind of gathers their thoughts and decides to start participating. So as to fill the dead space, I do that well. So clinical displacement is definitely a term that has been very controversial in more recent times right now. They wrote into our sunset bill, this last one, to tell us that the board can take into consideration resources, which actually include faculty and clinical sites, as well as, the footprint of the building, et cetera, to make our enrollment decisions. And so we do recommend and encourage the use of consortiums that help to monitor that. I want to put out some ideas. Nevada uses a statewide consortium. That's a heck of a concept. When I heard about that, I thought that was absolutely you, Garrett, about the statewide consortium would be amazing. Those consortiums are only as good as the healthcare institutions that participate in it, and that is the limiting factor. If not all healthcare organizations are agreeing to use a consortium and only doing clinical placements through that consortium, then that consortium is very worthless. Academic institutions will continue to try to find clinical placements through their normal means, which would be directly reaching out to the agency and then the agency approving them on what people have commonly referred to them as squatters' rights or historical placements. And that causes concern. In the Sunset Bill as well, they addressed the pay-to-play option. There were rumors out there that academic institutions were paying through donations to funds, tickets to events, doing kind of fist bumps and shoulder rubs on other board meeting participations, not our California board, but maybe the board of the hospital or the board of the community that they're in, to gain clinical placements. And so that was written into our law now, that we can actually investigate and take action on schools that pay for clinical placements in our pre-licensure nursing programs. And I think a big issue that I know has been very prevalent lately with clinical placement is when we're looking at that from a board standpoint on enrollment increases. I think that's what everybody thought that was the only thing we looked at, that the board only considered, are there clinical placements to support this? As all of you guys, I'm sure, are aware, nursing education in academic preparation is much, much more broad than clinical placement. And so there is clinical placements out there. One of the things that Garrett and other members had mentioned in the last agenda item was not just the clinical placement, but whether or not that clinical placement can provide a robust experience. During COVID, we were getting requests to have Meals on Wheels approved as a med-surg clinical placement. We were getting requests to have standardized patients approved as clinical placements because there just wasn't clinical placements. We did go ahead and work with our academic partners to allow for them to give clinical credit towards COVID injection facilities. That was supposed to be partial preparation in med-surg, because ultimately the clinical agencies must be able to meet the objectives of med-surg. And I can guarantee you the only clinical objective for med-surg was not to give a COVID vaccine. And so we really ran into issues with clinical placements. And then to talk about impaction, we've had a couple schools close their doors. So instead of having that school available to prepare new nurses, they've actually had to close. We had a school close in San Diego, who over the last 2 years just reported back to their NEC constantly that they were not able to find clinical placements, and that even on their teach out, they're still having a difficult time getting their students through because they're not able to get clinical placements. They did specifically put in their teach out plan that it wasn't because of clinical placements, but I can tell you affirmatively that we have documentation that it was definitely clinical placements that affected the success of this school. We also get reports from various consortiums that they say they have 1,000 requests and only 50 have been granted, or 400 have been granted, depending on the area that you're in. We had another school close in Irvine, which was a very unique school and very outside of the box, really worked with that academic clinical partnership that is pushed nationwide. And this school had a setup that really addressed a lot of that clinical practice gap that we are talking about, where a person was assigned to a hospital for all of their clinical rotations. They did fundamentals, med-surg, OB-Ped, psych, mental health, and Geri at one hospital setting with a on the same unit, except for, of course, the specialty areas that they did an off-float to. And by the time that student graduated, there was no need for a new grad program. They went right into staffing because they were there and on the unit and actively participating that entire time. That school had to close because they were not able to have clinical placements at all in Irvine area. And then further north, and so I've done a south example. The first college or university was in San Diego. The next one was more central, up in the LA Irvine area. I know that's not definitely the definition of central, but more central. And then we had one up north with the College of the Siskiyous that just closed their nursing program because they weren't able to get faculty to address the clinical need when, as discussed previously, they went from allowing a 10-to-1 student to faculty ratio to now doing a 5-to-1 student to faculty ratio, therefore increasing the faculty demand double. And so those are the things that really just kind of, we need to open it up, have conversations. What's the, any ideas on how to move forward with this? Knowing that right now our board has redirected enrollment increased feasibilities, new schools, new campuses away from the Orange County, Irvine, San Diego areas, LA, because at this point it has been reported by the schools in those areas that they cannot grow because they do not have adequate, not that they don't have clinical, they don't have adequate clinical placements to be able to educate their students and get them practice ready.
Great, thanks, Lori. Let's open it up to the public. So Mark, please, can you open the public comment period?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for a comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Nicole W. would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Go ahead, Nicole. Nicole, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Oh, can you guys hear me now?
There you go. Gotcha. Thank you. Uh-oh, we lost her.
Board moderator, if you want to move on to the next commenter while we try to get her back, that would be fantastic, just on the sake of time.
Yeah, she's back. Nicole?
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm Nicole Ward. I'm the Director of SRN at Sharp Healthcare. I facilitate all the clinical placements at Sharp. I wanted to know if the BRN is aware of the declining availability of certain specialties in the acute care arena and alternatives for those replacements. So, for example, hospitals are having less and less areas for like med-surg and women's health. So those competing assignments are getting more competitive because hospitals, especially at Sharp, may only have, I know at Sharp, we only are down to 3 units in our entire enterprise that are med-surg. And we're down to basically 1 hospital that is OB. So looking at alternative areas that will fill those requirements, like home health or maybe the forensic space to meet med-surg requirements. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So we do not actually define the areas. And when working with our program directors, we have compiled suggestions that other people have submitted as to what can be used for alternatives. We have nothing in our regulatory or statutory language that requires clinical experience to occur in a hospital setting. And we encourage the use of community settings to meet the preparation. So med-surg can absolutely be addressed within a hospital setting. It can be addressed on a med-surg unit, a tele unit, a DOU unit. It could be in ICU, ER. It could be in a surgical suite. But then you can also take that a step outside of the hospital, and you can see that it could be answered in home health, in palliative, in hospice, in various convalescent centers, rehabilitation centers, SNFs. Those can all be utilized for the med-surg experience, and it is not limited to an acute care setting. Additionally, when you look at the women's health or the obstetrics realm, that women's health doesn't necessarily have to be done within a labor and delivery unit. And a lot of people have that misconception that that's where it needs to live. But you can go into gynecological surgeries. You can go into the prenatal clinics, into the antenatal clinics. You can go into an antepartum unit or a postpartum unit as well. You can also go into birthing centers and have experiences within the birthing centers. You can do the postpartum follow-up care. We've had people do clinical off rotations. And again, it can't be all of it because there's no way that it could answer all of the objectives in women's health. But if you did a day in a WIC clinic, a women, infants, and children clinic, where they do the assessments and valuations and stuff, that could count as well. Depending on how you set up your objectives and choose your clinicals to meet those objectives, there are many, many things that can be done. If you've got a person that is on like a bed rest at home that is being managed through home health with the focus on the pregnancy,
that's absolutely something that can be done, where they go out and do a Doppler and assess fetal tone, see if there's any contractions, pains, skin breakdown, etc. So those can absolutely occur. Additionally, you did mention forensics. Forensics is absolutely a specialty, and depending on what the forensics is focused on, it could check off some of the women's health, but it can also check off other areas as well. The one that I'm most familiar in, because I used to be a sexual assault nurse examiner, is SANE nursing. And with that, that could absolutely be counted towards a lot of women's health experience, because the majority of the clients that come in are women that you would do assist with pelvics and do examinations, et cetera. So
I'm sorry,
the sky is the limit with these clinical experiences, and please don't think that the BRN is limiting to that at all. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm sorry. I want to get to as many people as we can. One of the things that I would say, Nicole, is that I am interested in relooking at the language within Title 16, Section 1426. To your point and to what Lori just said, words matter. So when it says in the regulations medical surgical, while it is true that the BRN is very expansive in their interpretation, the words are misleading in my opinion. And so I'm gonna look at that as we continue to move forward. Mark, can you unmute Lisa Lucchesi, please?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'll keep my comments short. My name's Lisa Lucchesi. I'm the Dean from San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton. And I just want to acknowledge that the BRN continues to identify the regional needs of schools. As we know, the Southern region has been impacted greatly, but as an example for our program, yesterday I met with two of our largest providers, and they were begging me to increase enrollment for spring of 2024. And just that the BRN continues to identify an easier process for us to pivot and meet the needs of our clinical providers. So they're willing. We have a couple of special programs with them to elevate employees as incumbent workers. And they have the employees ready to do that, and we're ready to meet those needs, but the process can be cumbersome, so that anything we can do to smooth that process and help us meet our community's needs, we'd appreciate.
What school were you again? I'm sorry, I missed that first part.
Sorry about that. San Joaquin Delta College in Stockton.
Thank you. Perfect.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bryn O'Neill would like to make a comment. Go ahead, Bryn.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to acknowledge all of Friday's comments, so that the BRN is clearly thinking a lot about how to expand clinical placement. Appreciate that. And in particular, we encourage the BRN to think about ways it can support the maintenance and expansion of clinical programs and program capacity at community colleges. Without expanded clinical education capacity, community college nursing programs can't expand to open more seats, as we all know. When community college nursing programs can't expand, an important access point to the nursing profession for students from low-income, rural, and diverse communities is cut off. In particular, the BRN should support clinical faculty at community colleges and associate's degree nursing programs to maximize affordability and accessibility of nursing education. Clinical education requires dedicated time and expertise of trained faculty and educators. We can't expect it to be done by working bedside nurses as they juggle their patient care duties. And moving to increased simulation is also not sufficient to prepare new nurses. So NUOC can also look at ways that the BRN can help nursing programs retain clinical faculty, which could maybe include surveys of clinical faculty on retention issues. And the BRN could look at ways to have more transparency from nursing programs on their clinical placements. For example, they could look at ways like expanding their current surveys of workforce in schools to collect more information on clinical placements and make that information public, which includes what shifts, what facilities, units, nursing programs, and other type, info on clinical placements are available in which programs. And NUAC can look at ways to see if the BRN can get more information and more transparency on the contracts and the arrangements that nursing programs have with facilities and clinical sites that can kind of dictate which programs are getting that clinical space. And that can all give the BRN and the public a better understanding of where and why clinical impaction is occurring and why community colleges are having such difficulties expanding their clinical. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryn, and I'll follow up really quick again. You seem to have amazing comments and always elicit some feedback. So this one we do have the jurisdiction over. And because of that, we have created a data bank. It is a clinical facilities data bank. It is right now being built. It is in the testing phase, and it will have all of the clinical placements, facilities, et cetera, that each school is associated with by contract. We do also have the regulatory authority over the contracting of that for clinical facilities. So we approve, we look at the contracts, and now we have gathered all the data. That data is due to be published some point in 2024. You will then have access to sort by facility or sort by academic institution. If you sort by facility, it will show which academic institutions are with them. If you sort by academic facility, you will see which facilities are associated with them. So we will be able to have that information. That information also has the average daily census, how many students they'll be able to accommodate, what shifts they are on, et cetera. So everything that you asked, that will be out and available for publishing some point in 2024. It is in testing right now, and it does answer the California State Audit recommendation that was given to our board in June of 2020. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move to the next. Elizabeth Riley wrote a question because the panelists comment on the viability of AB 1577, which would require hospitals to meet the clinical placement needs of community college nursing programs or face fines. I'm going to defer that to Elizabeth. I would like for you to follow up with the legislative committee of the Board of Registered Nursing. They're following that. So you can get more information about that, that particular bill in that committee.
And we do have a legislative meeting scheduled for this month. You could find that on our website under the meeting section. So please participate in that. We are watching that, and I believe our board took a position of watch.
Great, thanks so much. Leanne Burke.
I'm Leanne Burke, and I'm the program director for pre-licensure programs at University of California, Irvine. And I would just like to request, as a comment or related to a few comments ago, relating to the discussion of utilizing community agencies for clinical hours. It's a wonderful idea, and we use it at our school as much as possible, but also to relate back to some of the other conversations regarding faculty, difficulty in keeping faculty and the difficulty in paying faculty and having so many faculty because of the small group sizes. Utilizing clinical agencies, especially community clinics such as like federally qualified health centers, they're very small and not all of them have registered nurses working in them. So it's very difficult to place individual students at a clinic with RN oversight without sending a registered nurse faculty member to be that RN oversight. So just as a consideration for the BRN to think about is that many of the regulations also impede our ability to use outside agencies outside of the acute care setting, as well as logistically, it's extremely difficult to plan for individual students when in an individual course that are time limited because of our academic quarters or semesters. So these are just considerations that program directors logistically have difficulty planning around despite our best efforts.
I appreciate your feedback. I do want to just kind of challenge you to think outside of the box with that. We do support preceptor models. I did kind of give an example of that one with the one school that closed they did not have RN on site. There is no requirement that a faculty member be present. They have to have an ability to oversee that, which is why several schools use a preceptor model for the final clinical group of the academic program. That preceptor model can be used in fundamentals all the way through your advanced med surg, including your specialties. So a faculty does not have to be present. Arizona actually did a presentation at a conference this year, and they talked about the faculty being available via FaceTime for some of the rotations. So we do not have a requirement for in-person faculty. We do have a requirement for faculty oversight and the ability to communicate. We do have the requirement for competency, et cetera. So please reach out to your NEC. We'd be happy to work with you on how you can get these clinical spaces in the community up and running and work with within the faculty confines. So please note that we are here to support, and we would love to be able to expand the way that people think about faculty oversight, and that it does not require them to be in person, as evidenced by our preceptorship that is typically ran.
Am I able to comment back?
Yeah, please.
Oh, thank you. I love that. And actually, we do have a fabulous preceptorship program, and because we have a medical center, an academic medical center, we are able to find 70 preceptors for 120 hours for each one of our students, which is extremely rare. But to do that takes about 250 of my hours to find 70 preceptors. And we don't have our faculty on site for all of those. But even to find RNs in clinics that are actually on site to oversee RN students, many of the clinics don't have RNs on site. They don't have registered nurses in their clinics at all. So that's what I meant, not faculty on site. I meant even RNs on site. But even that preceptored model, I think actually, if that were the way we could go, I think that that practice gap would truly be really much less. I think that is really the answer. To be honest, I think if we had each student mentored, they wouldn't have this large, every single shift that they were at the hospital, they wouldn't have to be reintroduced to a new nurse who didn't trust them, who didn't know where they were. They would be able to make strides forward every single week. So I think that preceptored model, if we could move that everywhere, I would love that. And I would work on that with you every day of the week, every day of the week.
That's great.
I'm in, I'm in.
Great. The BRN supports it. It's up to the academic institutions to implement the curriculum that works best for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. It looks like we got through everyone. I want to thank the public first and foremost for your engagement and contributions. We couldn't do this without you. I want to thank the advisory committee members for your incredible insights and also contributions. Kind of our next steps are to try to figure out who is going to be the co-chairs of various subcommittees. I hope everybody has a great summer. I think we can move to 8.0, which is adjournment. And again, thank you everyone for all of your hard work and your time today. Have a great week.